here. Michael Flynn had every opportunity to be honest, and he decided not to. So let's not like it's not difficult to say, yeah, he shouldn't lie as the next national security advisor. He shouldn't lie to the FBI about these conversations.
Okay. So
Harry, weren't these charges dropped?
No, Donald Trump pardoned him. No, Donald Trump pardoned him.
Yeah, Nick, let me ask Harry this question. Harry,
sure.
What was specifically for everyone? Go ahead and give us the specific details. What was the substance of the lie? Do you recall in the notes?
Well, it was just about it wasn't just one lie, right? It was about overall his conversation with a Russian official. I forget the Russian official's name, but it was about the conversation as a whole. He was asking, like, did you talk? Basically, what happened was the Obama administration put sanctions on Russia for their interference in the 2016 election, and Putin was considering retaliating. And Michael Flynn, as the incoming national security advisor, was talking to Russian officials saying, no, listen, don't take action. We're going to be there soon. We're going to get in. Just tell Putin to chill out. And that was kind of the topic around the conversation. And Michael Flynn lied about talking about those sanctions with.
So the substance of this, and I'm sure Sebastian has something even more clear on this than I'm going to give. But the substance
Sebastian blocked me, by the way. I don't know why.
What you're saying, but anyway, go ahead, Sebastian.
Are you surprised?
I think I know why.
Are you surprised that I blocked you? Because you're a fucking
I've never spoken to you. Like, I don't know
lying about a friend of mine who spent 32 years in military intelligence and ended up as the director of DIA. That's why, because you're an asshole. All right.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Let's talk about Flynn. I'm not sure this is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure this thing is about Mike Flynn, but anyway. So let's be very clear what happened, because James Comey has admitted this on a public event. Admitted this. McCabe admitted this. So Mike Flynn, the week of Christmas, I was working on the presidential transition team for Mike Flynn. He was on vacation with his wife when a call was put through to Ambassador Kislyak. And the substance of the conversation was actually there was a vote coming up in the UN to sanction Israel. And we wanted assistance from the Russians not to partake in this vote sanctioning Israel. That was the substance of the phone call. If you don't believe me, you can read the transcript that was illegally leaked. And the FBI, through the NSA, because it was a Russian ambassador, had intercepted this phone call and had the full transcript of the phone call. Comey admitted he sent in McCabe and another senior FBI officer to entrap Flynn, because they had the full transcript, and to ask him whether he remembered specific details. Now, Michael will admit this to you. He didn't want to say this at the time. He was on vacation. He'd been working his ass off in the transition team. He'd had 2 glasses of wine that night, and he couldn't fully remember every detail of the conversation, and he forgot some of the details of the conversation. None of them was untoward. None of them was illegal. He was the incoming national security advisor, which is the only cabinet level position in any administration that is not Senate confirmed, which means he is fully authorized after the election to get to work. And I know that because I was working directly for Mike Flynn, setting up those phone calls with people like Ambassador Kislyak, with the Prime Minister of Japan, and so forth. The FBI had the transcript. They entrapped him because they asked him, do you remember saying this? And he said, no, I didn't say that. In the 302s, they actually afterward stated, we don't think he lied to us, but it was used against him and he was blackmailed. They said, your son, Mike Jr., who's got a pregnant wife, we're going to throw the book at him for FARA violations, and your son is going to go to prison unless you cop a plea deal to the FARA violations for Turkey and other extraneous garbage. That man was ruined for 3 years, had to sell his home to pay the legal fees, and it was a put-up job. And Comey joked about it at an event. He said, yeah, in a more experienced administration, I would have gone through the general counsel to the White House, but I didn't. Ha, ha, ha. I just sent in the 2 agents, who, by the way, didn't fill out the 302s, which is regulation, for 4.5 months. That's the story of Mike Flynn, but I don't think the people joined this space to talk about the
and so Sebastian,
so let me
hang
on, Jim. Jim. Let me add some context real quick, man. I want to respond to a point that Harry made before we go into this. The Justice Department filed in May of 2020 a motion to dismiss with prejudice the criminal information against Flynn, and the chief prosecutor publicly called for Flynn's charges to be dropped. So I'll go ahead and let you go, Jim.
No, and Sebastian, I mean, it's pretty simple also to say, and you brought out a very significant fact on this. Don't talk about Michael Flynn lying. How about FBI agents that refused to follow procedure because their intent was to make it come out as a lie for the very purpose of shutting the guy down?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I just said, right? So, I mean, that's what I was saying before the space was shut down too. So it's entrapment, and we all seem to be on the same page here, except Harry. So.
Yeah, except, the leader of the Justice Department at the time when those charges were dismissed was Barr, who also covered Donald Trump's ass in the Russia investigation and said that there was no evidence of obstruction of justice, and the investigation found nothing. So I wouldn't take Barr.
Harry, was that not Robert Mueller? Was that not Robert Mueller that said that?
Robert Mueller? No. Barr.
He said there was no collusion. No, the special counsel said there was no collusion.
I'm not alleging that there was collusion. I'm not alleging
$40 million.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian.
$40 million. 500 affidavits. 300 witnesses.
300 people charged. 300 people plus charged and indicted. 100% success rate. Yeah. We've heard
nobody for Russian collusion.
Anyway, but as I was saying,
isn't that interesting?
As I was saying,
not one person has been convicted of Russian collusion. How weird is that?
Wait. When did I say that there was Russian collusion?
Not to mention,
that's right.
That's
right. Because I didn't. But just for the record, I want to make it clear that I'm not alleging Russian collusion. I'm not saying that Donald Trump himself colluded with Putin.
Was the bloody whole point, you moron?
No. First of all, absolutely not. That investigation started as investigating the Russian interference in the 2016 election. It was not alleging that Trump colluded with Russia. That was not the beginning of the investigation. The investigation later expanded to Donald Trump.
That was the whole basis
of new evidence.
This guy has no idea what he's talking about.
It was all founded. It was all founded off the Steele document.
Sorry, guys, just one at a time. It's getting heated, which is great, but let's try to keep it flowing. Say your sentence, leave a space, let somebody else respond.
Yeah, I was just going to back up Harry on this. I mean, the Mueller probe began as an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. It found that multiple people within the Trump campaign and people around Trump were in discussions with Russia. They were trying to set up back channels with Russia.
Sorry. Who are the multiple people in back channel discussions? Just put it on the record.
And also,
can I just finish my point here before?
No, listen, because this whole thing just got disproved yesterday too, with the fact that the FBI agent that originally investigated Donald Trump and spread all of these lies and these falsehoods and conspiracies about Russia collusion, ironically, was just arrested for improper and illegal conduct with a Russian oligarch.
Wait, you think that helps your argument? That is so bad for your side. Yes.
How is it bad for our side?
You're right. Absolutely. Happy to explain.
Absolutely. Guys, can we let Brian? Sorry, can we let Brian continue what he was saying and respond to Laura's point there?
Sure, that's my bad.
Yeah. And thanks, Sam, and hi, Laura. It's nice to see you in here. I know we disagree, but So what I was saying, the special counsel investigation was to investigate Russian interference in the election in 2016. They indicted, I think it was over 34 people. There were 8 guilty pleas. Like I said, they found that the Trump campaign were trying to set up back channels. They did not prove that any back channels were set up. They also were looking at whether Trump obstructed justice, and they found that Trump did obstruct justice. So, I mean, the whole point of whether there was Russian collusion, if you want to call it or not, it's kind of moot, because if he obstructed justice, the investigation would not have been able to find that he colluded or his campaign colluded. I'm not saying they did. But I mean that.
Can I respond to that?
No, let's take a look at this, because and Sebastian's going to know the actual number. I don't remember it, but listen, the whole basis of that investigation was a false report that was used. What is it, Sebastian? 5-6 times to go back to the FISA court.
Yeah, so this is kind of like, I'm not sure if this is what Mario wanted to do with this space, but and there's no point really debating it, because the likes of the Krasensteins who just
Sebastian, how about instead of attacking people, you just have a discussion?
Hang on, Brian.
Let Sebastian talk.
People were found to have back. Multiple Trump campaign officials were found to have tried to create back channel relations with Russia. No, that's just a lie. You can't even name one of those individuals.
Do you want me to talk about that?
Carter Page, who was the first victim, had actually helped the FBI put multiple Russian agents in jail. That was Carter Page. A DOJ lawyer had to forge a CIA document which stated Carter Page has assisted us in the past, to forge it, to reverse it, to say Carter Page is a Russian asset. He was found guilty of forging that document. He was suspended for 8 months from the DC bar because he actually forged a CIA document to be used in evidence in an illegal FISA court surveillance warrant against Carter Page, after which they used the 2-hop rule to spy on any member of the Trump campaign. And I will say, for the record, in the 6 years since then, not one individual has been charged or prosecuted or convicted for working with the Russians or colluding with the Russians from the campaign or the administration. On the contrary, Charles McGonigal, the head of counterintelligence for the biggest FBI field office in America, in New York, was arrested 2 days ago, and he was charged in a 38-charge indictment with working for Armenian and Russian oligarch and intelligence assets, receiving $250,000 in cash in one payment. And by the way, who's Charles McGonigal? He's the person Comey sent to New York to be head of CI, and he's the FBI senior supervisory agent in charge who initiated Operation Crossfire Hurricane against Mike Flynn. So if you want to talk about this issue, I am happy to talk about this issue, but let's talk facts.
Okay, yeah.
Not bullshit.
Let me respond to that. So you said there is no back channels trying to be set up. There were several back channels. You can talk about Eric Prince in the Seychelles was trying to set up a back channel. You can also talk about Jared.
Eric Prince didn't work for the campaign. What are you talking about?
Hey, Sebastian, calm down there, buddy. Let me finish what I'm saying. Okay, Jared Kushner.
I'm not your buddy, dude.
Well, okay.
I am not your buddy.
Will you be my buddy? I really want you to be my buddy. So
Sebastian's a triggered
dude, just Brian, get to your point, man.
I'm not compelled, buddy.
Yeah. So like I was saying, Jared Kushner, as well as other people within the Trump administration, including Michael Flynn, talked to Sergei Kislyak. I can't say his name. The Russian ambassador Kislyak, to discuss a back channel. This took place. The Mueller report found that this took place. So I mean, it's irresponsible to say that.
What are you saying? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well,
I mean, some of the stuff that you're making up.
Maybe
some of the stuff you're making up. I know where you're getting it from. Other stuff I don't even know where you're getting it from.
Like what? What don't you know where I'm getting it from?
What misconduct did General Flynn engage in related to Ambassador Kislyak about back channels? That's just ridiculous. He was the incoming national security advisor. He talked to the ambassador of Russia in a way to advance U.S. interests, and by their own admission, he had done nothing wrong, yet they continued to spy on and target him. The story of Russia is the story of government abuse using Russia as a pretext to target their political opponents. And they made it up and they lied in admissions. Mueller found, to be clear, that no American knowingly colluded with the Russians to change or affect the outcome of the election. That's what Mueller concluded.
Yeah.
So, this is all just make believe.
Okay,
And Seb is right. There should have been people put in jail and or fired in significant ways. Many were fired, although for pretend reasons other than spying. It's President Trump is a crime victim in ways no president in American history has been.
Yeah, well, General Michael Flynn is a free man. He's a patriot and a hero. So can we all please just talk about what we actually came on this space to talk about, Trump 2024?
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I agree.
It is related.
Sebastian, can we just ask you to give your opinion now on the 2024 election and Trump's chances?
I think it's his if he wants it. If anybody runs against him, we'll have a primary, which is the American way. He'll do what he did in 2015. And the last man standing will probably be President Trump. And I think he's the guy we need because everybody else is somebody who would want to serve for 8 years, which means they're going to want to be reelected after 4. President Trump can't be reelected after 4, which means he can come in and really burn the swamp down. He can get rid of the people at the 7th floor of the Hoover building, the political hacks running the DOJ. He can start cleaning out shop at CIA and NSA. So, we need a bull in a china shop, and President Trump is that person if he wants it. I think he wants it. Everybody else is just going to be a politician unless a celebrity climbs into the ring, which is not out of the question. President Trump was a celebrity and not a politician. The real issue isn't him or his running. It's the GOP, the RNC under Romney, McDaniel under Mitch McConnell, who have done nary a thing to clean up the election fraud in America or even organized ballot harvesting in those states where it is legal. That's the challenge. It's election integrity and playing the system where it has to be played in ways where the DNC and the Democrats actually have the process down, like the big Democrat cities in Republican states.
So Sebastian, actually, Tom or Laura, let's have you jump in first, and then I want to hear from Tom too.
Yeah, I've already endorsed President Trump for 2024, and obviously he's the best man for the job. Clearly, there's already an organized effort where the RNC and the DNC have joined forces to undermine President Donald Trump. You see this in this very fake and manufactured, Ron DeSantis for president operation that they've decided to launch with the Murdochs and Fox News. And of course, Paul Ryan, who's an advisor to Ron DeSantis, has endorsed Ron DeSantis for president, said that he hopes Ron DeSantis runs against President Trump. And then, of course, like I said, he's on the board of Fox News. So this is a very coordinated effort by the most treacherous rhinos and deep state actors to, push out. It's essentially like, psychological operation where they're trying to push out fake polls. You see this. I live in Florida, and I voted for Governor DeSantis for reelection, but I certainly don't want him to run against President Trump. And I think that you're already seeing people like Nikki Haley entertain a presidential run. You can expect John Bolton to probably file to run as well. But ultimately, even if President Trump ends up winning the primary, the biggest factor in him getting to the White House for, I guess, his second term, even though, we all know he won in 2020 as well, is going to be voter fraud. And the fact that the RNC and the GOP leadership has done absolutely nothing to address big tech election interference, censorship, and mail-in ballot fraud. So given the fact that Republicans have control of the House, but all their bills are going to be dead on arrival in the Senate, I don't really see any real genuine or impactful election reform taking place. We're definitely not going to have federal voter ID laws with Democrats in control of the Senate. Big tech is still completely out of control. So it's just, we've already seen it doesn't matter how good of a candidate you are. You can be the best candidate. President Trump literally ran against an Alzheimer's patient who didn't campaign at all, and they stole the election. And my fear is that, we're going to have a repeat of that in 2024, even though President Donald Trump is the best man for the job.
So what's the point of anyone running if they're going to steal the election?
Well, that's what I've been saying lately, especially as a two-time congressional candidate. And look, I was the only deplatformed candidate, the first in U.S. history to be completely denied access, even though I won the Republican nomination. President Donald Trump endorsed me and he voted for me in 2020 when I was on the ballot. I think America's a failed state now, personally. I know that some people on the right tend to disagree with me, but I really honestly think we're at the point of no return. I really I'm hoping for a miracle and hope that President Donald Trump can get into the White House again so that he can burn the swamp down, as his last final hurrah. But the likelihood of that, it's not necessarily, a deficiency on President Donald Trump, but it's a testament to just how crooked and corrupt our election system is in this country. The fact that, Facebook announced today that they're finally going to reinstate Trump's account on Facebook and Instagram. The fact that he filed months ago to run for reelection and they kept him banned and have kept, the leader of the free world before the transition of power took place in 2021, they banned him. The fact that big tech is now more powerful than any elected representative or any representative body in this country in the entire world shows you we don't have real elections in this country. We have selections in this country. And that's why, I filed a $10 billion RICO case recently against Facebook and Twitter and Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg and P&G and actors within the FBI for their illegal election interference. And, these crimes, this is a coordinated criminal conspiracy. And thanks to Elon Musk, right, who released these Twitter files, we now know that, no, this is not a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy reality and a conspiracy fact.
So Josie, and for all who don't know, that's the redheaded libertarian up there. Welcome to the panel. We'd love to have you here. But I do want to ask you a question about that. So there are a lot of allegations about, voter fraud, the 2020 election being stolen, and possible ways that was done. So I want your feedback on that, but then I also want an opposing opinion on that. So if you can run us through that, I'd appreciate it.
So it's my belief that there was a lot of ballot harvesting that went on during the 2020 election and also the 2016 election. But so ballot harvesting, when you go into one building in a city, you can come out of there with 2,000 ballots. A lot of people live in one building. If you're going to try to ballot harvest in the country, you can walk 10 miles between houses before you get another human being. So I believe it's Scott Pressler who's trying to come up with a way to teach Republicans how to ballot harvest in the states it's legal, just like the Democrats do, because at this point, I'm not sure we'll ever have another Republican president again. And if that happens, there's no balance. There's certainly no democracy with all the unelected actors that are leading the charge, whether it's in the FBI, which is very corrupt. I can't imagine being a fanboy for them, or in big tech. There's a lot of people running this, as Laura said. It's a selection at this point. So I'm hoping that Republicans will follow Scott Pressler's lead. He has flipped red counties, I believe Miami or something thereabouts. He flipped he flipped a blue county red is what I mean to say. I'm sorry. So I believe he has the tools. He'd be able to teach people. But so that's my opinion on the ballot harvesting. It's you got to beat them at their own game at this point. And there's really nothing that they won't do to attain power, as they call it, their democracy. Every time you hear democracy, if you replace it with hegemony, it makes a little more sense. So every time you see a threat to our democracy, you read it as a threat to our hegemony, and you'll be like, oh.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that we even have democracy in this country anymore. I think that we're living in a communist technocracy, if anything. Okay. So just as you added on right to what I was saying about the fact that it's a selection. So it's clear, what democracy, what democracy do we have in this country? I don't see it. I mean, we're living under communism. Choice is an illusion in this country. So, honestly, I think the issue of ballot harvesting and mail-in ballot fraud is certainly an issue, but also I think one of the biggest issues too is the machines. Okay, in the state of Florida where I live, people want to say, "Oh yeah, we have clean and fair elections." We don't. Our state uses the ERIC system. Okay, big tech is going completely unpunished for censoring candidates and deplatforming individuals like myself. I mean, my race, for example, was only determined by 5,800 votes. Okay, and when you look at the fact that I was the only candidate denied all access to social media, and the media was about to call my race for me on election night at 99% reporting, and then all of a sudden, right, a batch of 58 mail-in ballots came in. It's pretty clear that big tech is playing a really big role in who's sitting in office today and who isn't. So I think that when you look at the fact that big tech is also financing a lot of the mail-in ballot fraud that is taking place in our country, like last election season, 2020, over $400 million of Zucker bucks, okay, went towards these illegal drop boxes. It's a huge problem. And I think that Republicans have done a terrible job. And I say this as somebody who's been registered as a Republican my entire life, somebody who's disgusted with the GOP. I find myself to be politically homeless. They've done nothing to address big tech tyranny. Nothing.
Yeah. So Laura, I want to ask you 2 questions here, and then I got to go to Brian for a response, and then Tom, we're going to get you in here as well. Laura, so do you believe with the current system we have that there is a possibility that Trump can win in 2024? And if not, how do we fix that before 2024?
Well, like I said, I support President Donald Trump, and it's not a deficiency on his character. It's not a deficiency on his policies. I certainly support his America First agenda. It's a testament to the failures of our election system and just the corruption, right? We don't a uniparty. And so I don't really see currently how any Republican wins in 2024 right now. I don't see how we flip any of the House seats, any of the Senate seats. And while I want President Donald Trump to win, you can want something, but the reality of it, it's not that I don't think that he as a candidate is capable on his own accord. If we lived in a free and fair country with free and fair elections, he would have already been finishing up his second term in office right now. But we don't live in a free country anymore. We don't have due process. Okay. Look at these sham trials that are happening with regards to J6. Okay. You're not given a fair trial. You don't have freedom of association anymore. They've completely shredded the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and they've rigged and stolen our elections. And big tech, okay, which is financing all these deep state operations and all of these mail-in ballot harvesting operations, are the most powerful people in the world. So I just don't see how anybody on the Republican side gets to the White House in 2024. And I'm just being realistic.
Laura, I think you're underestimating the anger amongst the people. And I think we also underestimate that Trump, everything is known about Trump. There's nothing like in a debate that anybody can put on him that's going to have any effect on anyone, because it's all out there. DeSantis, I don't think is going to be able to stand up to the light.
Oh, I'm not saying that Donald Trump isn't capable of winning a primary. I'm just saying that he
I know, but
2020.
Yeah. I just think that the people have their eyes open right now. The fact that Facebook and Instagram opened him up today, and Google will do the same with YouTube. Mm-hmm. He's a wrecking ball. He's fucking reckless to the point to where nobody can handle him. And he tells enough truth in whatever manner he does it that it's so hard to manage. I have been privy to interview a lot of people. Managing that interview is like so difficult. This guy goes where he wants. He moves the conversation how he wants to, and he's compelling. And people follow him. So I just think the people are very angry. We don't know how much pent-up demand there is right now for the truth. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of it. And you see it with the COVID conversations, anything myocard, anything that's been suppressed seems to have a tremendous amount of energy in it right now.
Okay. So Brian, I'm going to let you respond to that, and then I got to go to Tom right after. So
yeah. So I don't think Trump doesn't have a shot. I think that he does have a shot, but if I was a Republican, I would probably be pulling for DeSantis because I think that he has a better shot. Now, that's given that Trump doesn't decide, hey, I lost the nomination, I'm going to run as an independent. I think that would really screw things over. But I would be, as a Democrat, I'm more fearful of DeSantis than I am of Trump, just because, I mean, Trump lost by 7 million votes. I don't think he's gained any since 2020. I don't think he's gained people that are going to vote for him. I think he could have lost some. DeSantis, I don't think he's the best candidate either. I think he's great in Florida, but I don't think he's great for the entire country. I think some of the social things he's doing would turn a lot of independents off. That's just my thoughts.
Tom?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. There's a lot to talk about here, but I'll just try to sum it up. The first question is, can Trump be the nominee, right? And that's probably more likely than not. I would give him 75% chance of being the nominee. And then once you're the major party nominee in this country, it's a jump ball politically at election time. And what the left has tried to do was to make it less of a jump ball. And, the Republican Party strategy in many elections is to kind of they factor in the fraud that their opponents engage in and try to overcome that with additional votes. And I think Trump attempted to do that in 2020 and was unsuccessful because the structure of the elections were changed in such a way that no matter what number he'd come up with, there'd always be just a little bit more for the other side in these key states. You have to go back to 2020 and remember on election night, President Trump had the votes to win the presidency. And that was changed. That result was changed as a result of unprecedented voting in vote counting in multiple states that occurred for days and weeks after the election. Nothing like that's ever happened before in American history, and it fatally undermined for half the country confidence in the outcome of the election. That's the reality. You can say that that shouldn't be the case, but that is the case. And now we find from the Twitter files that in addition to the infrastructure of the election being manipulated in a way that made election fraud almost too irresistible to not engage in. We had the system rigged by the media, by big tech, by censoring and withholding key information that would have a material impact on the race about a candidate, Joe Biden, while specifically throttling the reach of another candidate, President Trump. And we're seeing that already beginning to happen again with, Facebook pretending to let Trump on, but essentially threatening him with another ban through the election if he dares ask the wrong types of questions about election integrity. So, that's what we're coming into. And on top of that, we have the Justice Department actively interfering in the election with a raid on President Trump's home, the continued harassment of him on that issue, the Mar-a-Lago records issue, and by trying to criminalize disputing an election and thinking of ways to try to jail him for daring to exercise his rights under federal, state, and the Constitution, federal, state law, and the Constitution to challenge the elections. So those are the kind of the challenges. The question is are we going to have a jump ball election, which is typically what happens given the division in this country, or are we just going to have another rigged election in the sense that folks will have put their thumbs on the scale in a way that most directly we saw with the Twitter files, or in a way that ruins the election outcome in the sense that no one can have confidence in the outcome, and the losing side is upset as a result. And that's the reality. We're gonna and I think I'm calling it as fairly as I can, given my personal predilections as to who should be winning elections.
Yeah, so Tom, I do want to ask you one point on that. Do you believe that the mail-in ballots actually, because you're the president of Judicial Watch, I want everybody to know that, and you're very up on. You spend all day, every day, looking at data, looking at records. Do you believe that mail-in ballots change the result of the election? And was that because of fraud or just because of accessibility and ease of voting?
When the mail-in ballots are and collected and when the mail-in balloting is conducted and collected in a way contrary to state law at the time, that's fraud. You know, when you're doing things outside the law, that's fraud. You don't have to prove that this vote was defrauded. All you have to show is, in my view, and I think the law is pretty clear on this, that you can't be confident in the outcome given the grave disruption to the systems. And it's like going into an accounting firm, right? Or, you know, your accountant going into a financial firm or a bank, and they have black paint over all the cameras. They're not keeping books. They're telling you, oh, you know, what you want these numbers, give us 3 weeks to get them to you, even though they're supposed to be available upon demand. You just have to presume there's fraud going on when you've got such misconduct obviously happening in those processes. And I think that's the conclusion many Americans came to. And you know, what I would have done was if I were in state legislative authority and had the ability to do it, I would have rerun some of those elections in the states at the presidential level, given the fact that things were ruined so much. So I don't think, you know, there's a standard that, you don't have evidence of enough fraud, individual fraud. No, but when you set up a system that makes fraud impossible to detect and easy to commit, we should be very much concerned.
You know, Tom, I want to ask you a question, because I have been telling people for some time that another problem with this, like everyone was going around saying Dominion voting machines did this or that thing. And I don't know that I'm convinced of that necessarily at all, but let's just say that people are concerned about it. One of the major problems we have in the States as to that issue with electronic voting machines that do exist is the insistence upon voting or election officials to not allow thorough audits. Like they like shut it down. If anyone even tries to ask for it, they say, no way, you can't have access to it. And then you see some real aggressive attempts to not even just make it clear that it was done properly. And that I think is a real frustration for Americans.
Well, it is a frustration, and election officials aren't used to doing that. Yeah, you know, whether it's going to happen in 2024 or beyond, I don't know. I hope the Republic survives long enough. But you know, we need to move back because it's no way to run a railroad is to have elections that begin months before election day and that don't end and aren't resolved till weeks or months after election day. There's no reason in this modern society that states can't run an election and to get the results affirmed the day of by requiring people to show up with IDs, citizenship verified, to vote on the day of. And the outliers should be folks voting, and unsupervised voting should be rare. And the exceptions, in my view, should prove the rule that you have to vote in person with your identity verified and your citizenship verified. And the fact that the left opposes that and essentially wants to end elections, right? When you're conducting elections over months, that's not an election. That's a rolling survey that allows you to game the system in ways that our no law enforcement entity could track. Unsupervised voting is an anathema to fair and clean elections. And I understand why Republicans want to start embracing ballot harvesting, but that's another anathema to free and fair elections, widespread ballot harvesting. And so that's a game Josie, you're always going to be behind, and there's got to be some urgency in getting elections back to, integrity 101.
Yeah. So Josie, I'm going to let you respond to that, and then I got to go to Michael after that. So go ahead.
Respond to the ballot harvesting?
Respond to whatever you want to.
Okay. So ballot harvesting, the whole idea was that they're doing it in states where it's legal. So you have to match them in states where it's legal. I know it's hard and it feels dirty because it's not really the way Republicans have played in the past. But yeah, I did want to weigh in on something earlier. I host spaces on my page and I dedicate them to revolutionary history. I did one today on Thomas Paine, and a gentleman from Lebanon was listening in, and I made him a speaker, and he came in to speak, and he was saying how in Lebanon they're watching America, and they're watching America fall to what looks like communism, and this is from Lebanon, so this isn't just gossip from libertarians and conservatives that's watching this happen. And the other thing he said was that America is kind of the place everybody looks to. It's like the holy grail, and if America falls, there's nowhere else to go. So I mean, we are losing our republic. We are not a democracy. The illusion of democracy is actually extreme authoritarianism. And so if you are a Democrat and you want your people to win, like you really need to look at the First Amendment's gutted, the Second Amendment's gutted, the Fourth Amendment's gutted, like due process is trash. If you look at January 6th, like states' rights they're trying to infringe on. And just real quick, I wanted to roll into states' rights. I live in Florida. I have Governor DeSantis as my governor, and I like him as my governor very much. I read the bills, so I know I know why we don't have. I know why the "Don't Say Gay" bill is a pejorative term to turn off people to Florida, because the word "gay" is not even mentioned in it. But I like him as my governor. I believe, as a libertarian, the way forward is strong states' rights, because, like I said, I don't have faith that the elections can be corrected before we lose our republic. So that would mean that we can hopefully have 50 sovereign states who all have trade agreements, kind of like how it was at the beginning. And I worry about what would come after Ron DeSantis in my free state if he ran for governor, because I believe we should be strengthening states to prepare for what is happening to our federal government. So sorry, I bounced around a lot, but
no, it's okay. It's good. We love your opinion. Michael, you've been listening in for a while, so I do want your opinion. I'm sure you got a lot of points to make here.
Yeah, I've been trying to be on my best behavior and wait patiently and not interrupt, which can be difficult for me as a fundamentally immature child. I was thinking when I first came into this session, when we had that tangent going on around the Russia investigation and Mike Flynn, and it seemed like it was not at all relevant to the stated theme of the room, which is can Trump win in 2024? But I actually want to propose a way in which I actually think it is almost directly relevant, maybe in a sense that people don't quite comprehend immediately. First, just in terms of the purely descriptive element of this, I mean, I don't know if Harry is still in this room, but I have to just say, Harry, I'm impressed by how self-assured you were and how simultaneously just dead wrong you were on the basic facts. That's always an attractive combination. So just to clarify, and I promise I'm going to get to a broader point on Trump's prospects in 2024 here. I'm not just going on a pure tangent. But no, the appointment of Robert Mueller in May of 2017 was explicitly authorized, and you can find all the original source material corroborating this, explicitly authorized to investigate, quote, any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, which came to be synonymous with this notion of collusion. In the scope memo that Rod Rosenstein later issued to Mueller, clarifying the parameters of his investigative remit, he said that Mueller is authorized to investigate, quote, any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump. So clearly, the scope of Mueller's investigation was to investigate collusion. It wasn't just some side issue. It wasn't sort of immaterial or kind of ancillary. That was the whole reason why the investigation itself was ever even claimed to be necessary. And I'm saying that not to relitigate the Russia investigation, because Lord knows I spent plenty of time and more than enough time on that while it was underway. And unfortunately, if Sebastian is still here, Sebastian, this is something where you and I probably see more eye to eye than we did yesterday. So you can rejoice over that. Because Mike Flynn clearly was railroaded by entrapment, and lots of other people who got ensnared by the Russian investigation got unjustly targeted by the punitive weight of the federal law enforcement apparatus. And now, why is that relevant for Trump in 2024? Well, it stands to reason, I think, that given all which transpired while Trump was in office, given how exaggerated, given what exaggerated terms people, for example, seem to view January 6th in, where they'll call it a literal attempted coup, they'll call it a close call in terms of the government nearly being overthrown. They'll say that, it was the most profound attack ever on American democracy, or maybe even just humanity itself. I think it's probable that you're going to have factions within the federal law enforcement apparatus who similarly are going to have certain grudges against Trump in this forthcoming campaign, as they had against Trump in the 2016 campaign, based on his perceived sort of status as an interloper, or someone who is a threat to institutions, or who is in some nebulous sense of national security threat. And now that also ties to the Russia investigation more explicitly, in the sense that what are the issues at hand going to be probably as we proceed forward toward this primary cycle, right? All signs point to the Ukraine war continuing on. So, the specter of Putin, the specter of who is excessively kind of deferential to Putin, or doesn't oppose him enough, or doesn't want to send enough howitzers or tanks, that's all going to be kind of congealed in some sort of political attack narrative against Trump. So who knows? They could resurrect some sort of collusion allegation, because maybe lots of people in this room, except Harry, know that the basic facts of how that investigation was probably predicated, but it's not commonly known within the wider public. And there are lots of people who, maybe are still in the DOJ or the NSA or the CIA or the FBI, who think that maybe they can achieve vindication where Mueller failed them by not unearthing the bombshell evidence of smoking gun collusion that they thought was going to come out. So in terms of Trump's prospects in 2024, yeah, you could talk about election administration and stuff. I mean, Laura Loomer saying we live in a communist technocracy because she lost a Republican primary in Florida last summer, I think is a bit of a stretch. But, bracketing that, one also highly relevant factor is, to what extent are there going to be additional machinations against Trump within the federal law enforcement apparatus to undermine him and to box him in politically or maybe even legally?
Just to correct you, she didn't lose her primary. She won her primary. She lost the general election.
Correct.
No, she lost her primary in 2022 to the Republican incumbent. That's what I was just referencing.
In 2020, she was a nominee. Yeah. So
right.
You're
in
right.
2022, she ran again against Daniel Webster, the incumbent Republican congressman, and lost. And I guess if she got another 8 points and beat Daniel Webster in the Republican primary, we wouldn't be in a communist technocracy. So maybe it all hinges on her own electoral fortunes. I don't know. Maybe she can explain in a very persuasive way, I'm sure.
Okay, so Harry, let's bring you in on this, because I know you've got some opinions, and you were just called out. So let's hear you.
Yeah, no, I just want to quickly ask a simple question, Michael. Do you think Russia interfered in the 2016 election?
I'm not going to do your interrogation style questions.
Oh my God! So you can rant about me.
I brought up something that you were just flatly factually wrong about.
Oh, come on, man!
You could acknowledge being wrong about it when you say interfered.
No, don't run from the question. Don't run from the question.
Okay,
man.
I'll answer your question. I'll answer your question. I shouldn't have said that I won't answer, because even though it's a facile question, I'll answer it.
Really interesting.
Interference. Did Russia interfere? Well, I think interference is such a non-specific kind of manipulatable term that I just reject the premise of the validity of its use. Are you going to say now? Does interference mean social media bots. So like some whacked out troll accounts on Twitter or the Bernie Sanders and the Speedo meme on Facebook that you can trace in some roundabout way to the troll farm in St. Petersburg. Is that interference? Well, I don't know. I guess you could make a theoretical case for that, but I think the word interference was used so propagandistically and histrionically throughout the Trump presidency when the Russian interference narrative was at its peak that I'm just strongly disinclined to accept the premise of it being a descriptively useful term to use. So let me ask you, Harry, do you acknowledge that you were just dead wrong and like smugly so about the initial predicate for why Rod Rosenstein in May of 2017 appointed Robert Mueller special prosecutor?
Yeah, again, I dispute that. It wasn't to the
you
premise of the investigation.
wait,
time out. I let you rant for 10 minutes. I didn't interrupt.
Okay,
once.
go ahead.
You're
disputing primary source documents.
The reason for the investigation was to investigate Russian collusion, excuse me, Russian interference.
Exactly. Okay, we can stop
there. Not Russian collusion. That the investigation later expanded, but the beginning of the investigation.
I mean, you're wrong.
Was
Michael, let him respond.
You just don't know your facts, which again
makes
your smugness all the more absurd.
Michael, you got 10 minutes, buddy. The fact that you can't just say, yeah, Russia played a role in interfering in our election, which is
interference is a propaganda term that I'm not going to abide.
Wow, Michael, you can be quiet now. The fact that you can't just say Russia interfered in our election, which is the finding of our intelligence community and the finding of a bipartisan group in the Senate Intelligence Committee that was led by Republicans, is concerning. There's ample evidence. I'm not saying you're a Republican, but I'm saying it's bipartisan, right? There's ample evidence to
when something's bipartisan, it's more likely to be wrong.
Michael, do you have any restraints?
Michael, give him 15 more seconds, and then I'm going to let you respond.
Sorry, I'll give you 15 seconds.
I would prefer more because he got a lot, but that's
okay. We'll give you 30 then, Harry.
No, you're good. It's okay. I'm just saying it's okay. But anyway, I'll just wrap up by saying, because I want to address the bigger point that was made earlier about like the election stuff. But to just that you can't just say yes, they interfered is quite concerning for me, given the ample evidence. And I would direct you to the Mueller report, which it seems like you might not have read. But I just want everybody.
Believe me, I've read it.
I just want everybody in the crowd to acknowledge that all of the Republicans up here, or people on the right, I don't know, I'm not going to assume your political affiliation. All the people on the right up here that claim that the election was fraudulent didn't cite a single legal case in which voter fraud was found, which means they suggest that these legal bodies across the United States, many of which were Trump-appointed judges, are all engaging in a conspiracy to fuck over Donald Trump, excuse my language, and that includes the Supreme Court as well. So these people are suggesting that there's a massive conspiracy against Donald Trump. Just take that in and realize how crazy it is. He didn't win a single case. The only case he won, he didn't win a single massive voter fraud case. The only case he won was a case that pertained to the distance that people could stand from people counting ballots. That was the only case he won. All the other cases were denied. And then, maybe they'll say, oh, they were denied on standing. Yeah, if you don't have standing, that means you cannot prove that there was any harm done, there was any damage, right?
Well, so as someone who looked at these cases, Henry is just citing these talking points from the left that don't have any real basis in reality. The challenges the Trump campaign brought, most of them were still pending and were mooted out as a result of the deadlines that they ran up against. In Georgia, they had a substantial case alleging fraud and misconduct. The Georgia laws required the appointment of a judge. The chief judge in that case simply refused to do it until it became too late to litigate it, and it became all mooted out. So, this talking point about 62 election cases all lost, that's not the reality of the litigation. The cases brought by the campaign were substantial and were mooted out as a result of the certification for Biden, whether it be in December or in January. And the court's failures to grapple with these election challenges is a stain upon our judicial system. So it's the reality is much more complex than the young person talking about it.
Tom, it's really not though. Like there were over 60 cases brought.
Guys, can we?
I understand that's the talk.
Okay, sorry guys, we can't talk over each other. Can we bring Brandon in because he's been waiting patiently to talk?
Hey, what's up? I'd just like to say I folded 4 loads of laundry while I was waiting to answer the question, can Donald Trump win in 202024? So excellent.
Sorry, man.
Excellent.
Tough crowd. Tough crowd,
No,
Brandon.
sorry, you're in the wrong room.
We are here to serve you.
No, it's not a problem. I'm taking a very long trip tomorrow, so it was a good use of my time. Before I get started, I wanted to say too, Harry, my organization Walkaway, we're putting an effort into doing a lot of live debate events this year, and I would sincerely like to invite you to be a part of that. I sent you a DM, and I would love it if you answered me back, because we're always looking for strong voices on the left to represent that point of view. So please consider.
Oof, that's rough for the left.
All right. Anyway, the question is, can Donald Trump win in 2024? I would say the answer is yes, but I think the bigger question is, will he win in 2024? And unfortunately, my answer to that question is that unless a lot of things change, the answer is no. And I think we've talked exhaustively about election fraud issues and stuff. So that's not even what I'm getting into. I think that's been thoroughly covered and doesn't need to be addressed. The key issues that I see right now with Donald Trump are that circumstances in the world in 2023 are very, very different than circumstances in the world in 2015 and 2016. And Donald Trump is very different in 2023 than he was in 2015 and 2016. One of the key problems I see is that I believe, well, first, actually, before I even say the first thing, let me say there is an entire culture of MAGA people and Trump supporters and former Trump supporters who are, some are blatantly not in favor of him anymore. Some are on the fence and don't exactly know how to feel. But this culture has been developed on the right where it's not safe to talk about not supporting Donald Trump. And what's really interesting is that I actually walked away from the Democratic Party and walked away from liberalism because liberals got into this culture where you weren't allowed to challenge anything. You weren't allowed to ask questions. You weren't allowed to push back on people. Well, I'm seeing that exact same thing happening on the right now. So there's this huge sect of people who are just keeping their mouths shut about the fact that they don't support Donald Trump anymore. And so all of the people who are hardcore Trump loyalists think that he's got a lot more support than he
Brian,
does.
who's saying
really
you can't not support him? I'm curious. Who's saying that's verboten on the right?
Seb, I dare you right now to tweet out, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote for Donald Trump in 2020.
Yeah, but that's not my opinion. But you have to tell me who's doing that. You say it is a thing that's happening. Who's doing that? Who's saying you can't do that? I'm curious.
I mean, I guess I don't know how to explain to you specific examples, but I'm telling you it's a very real thing. I mean, it's not a small thing. It's a very real thing. I mean, I saw a number of people hitting the heart and the 100% button as I was saying it too.
Well, but it's weird. It's weird because I'm seeing hardcore Trump supporters. Yeah.
Hey, Seb. Can you pull your mic away?
Yeah. Hang on.
It's just weird because I'm seeing a lot of people who are hardcore MAGA.
That's much better.
You know, what's his name, Cardone and others, who are like totally DeSantis now, rabidly anti-Trump, and I don't see them getting any crap saying no, you're not allowed to say that or you're excluded from conservatism. So where is this happening? Who suffered that, and who's saying you can't do that? I mean, I love you, Brandon. I mean, you're like a brother, but who's doing this? Who's doing this? I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. It's a thing that I'm seeing all the time.
But then if you're seeing it, who's
on
doing
a regular basis?
Tell me, who's doing it?
I don't know the names of individuals. I'm telling you that when people put out posts that express that they're questioning, Tracy Beans, great example, Tracy Beans. Tracy Beans put out a post just the other day saying that she wasn't feeling Donald Trump's position on the vaccines. And then she had to write another post saying she couldn't believe the amount of backlash that she was getting from Trumpers because she was questioning Donald Trump.
Well, that's a little bit
Maybe
different from what you said. That's a little bit different from what you said, right? You know that. I mean, talking about vaccines and getting crap from people because you don't agree with their vaccine stance. That's a little bit different from saying you're not allowed to question Trump's supporting Trump, right?
She wasn't getting, but she wasn't getting pushback about the vaccine. She was getting pushback about questioning Trump.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced. I'd love to hear some concrete examples of somebody important, significant, not a troll, saying "How dare you."
Yeah. So Tom, let's get you in here, man. I know you've been.
Well,
I
barely gotten started.
Let's get Brandon. Let's let Brandon finish.
I wanted to ask Tom a question too.
That was Brandon's introductory comment. So I think, what we're seeing here at the, this is a primary, right? And there are other candidates and their supporters, and it's perfectly natural for voters in a primary, if it's not a totalitarian party, to say, oh, well, what else is out there? I may still probably vote for Trump, but I'm open to listening to DeSantis. I think one of the fake realities out there is suggesting that there's going to be a 2-candidate primary. DeSantis, who hasn't run or isn't running, as far as I can tell at this point, and Trump, and that's not going to be the primary. You're going to have at least a 6-person primary, I would think. And in that case, I think Trump is the overwhelming favorite. And I would say one way to analyze those who are thinking of running against Trump this term or this season, they're as much positioning themselves for the next election, because you have to remember it's an open seat in 2028. So I think the opposition to Trump is overstated. I tend to agree with Brandon. There's a lot of certainly in social media, there's a lot of friendliness to those who want to stick it to Trump. And I'm not saying there's any maliciousness there, but the idea that there's any significant blowback for any media figure or social media person for opposing Trump these days, I'm surprised about how quickly a lot of key social media people are willing to dump Trump. It's confusing to me, but it's I think looking at Twitter, you can see that a lot of people that we otherwise support, or folks we agree with on almost every issue. They're just pro DeSantis or anyone but Trump, and that's a pretty remarkable development. Doesn't mean Trump's going to lose, that's for sure.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you a quick question if I could. So in the aftermath of the 2020 election, I was getting inundated daily with people who are members of, the right-wing faction of my following, which is fairly sizable, with these absolutely 100% confident predictions in how this or that election fraud theory was going to pan out, and it was going to result in the negation of Biden's victory, and Trump was somehow going to get in office. And you could go down so many rabbit holes. There was a whole, there was a big cross section of people who were super invested in the eternal brilliance of Sidney Powell, if that name rings a bell. And I'm sorry, I mean, if you actually read what that woman put into her legal documents, it comes across like some sort of psychedelic, Alice in Wonderland tale. So I guess I'm just wondering if you think that to any extent, the right's preoccupation or let's say disproportionate focus on questions of election fraud or election administration has been debilitating. Because, you brought up early voting earlier, and I just double checked because I thought this was true. I looked up in Florida. I mean, there's early voting. Republicans are trending upward in Florida. Nobody seems to object that much, as far as I know, to the existence of early voting in Florida. Like, it's not seen as somehow the death knell to democracy or ushering in I think what Laura Loomer called a communist technocracy. So, I mean, in your experience, do you kind of glean any sort of undue fixation on this issue at the expense of others that might actually be of more political or electoral benefit to Republicans?
Well, I'm having trouble understanding where it was a not a benefit, because there were some folks who obviously objected to the election process who were reelected. I think to a degree it's a problem in the Republican Party. It's the disconnect between the millions of Americans who feel disenfranchised the 2020 election, and the Republican leadership that refused to kind of deal with it and grapple with it in the way I think appropriate. And I hope you heard, my discussion of it. I think there are substantial issues that need to be discussed as it relates to 2020 and the reforms going forward. So I think, there's a way of talking about it that I think most Americans would agree are a fair way of talking about it. And those who are worried about this issue have little voice in Republican leadership on these issues. And so to the degree that's going to be the negative side of it for Republicans, because I think people will be dispirited and feel like they can't get their votes counted and will stay home.
Do you think Sidney Powell did the cause justice in hindsight?
Oh, I think there's a standard for Sidney Powell that was applied to her that wasn't applied to anyone else. So
Well,
I mean, look,
everything
we're told to. I can't keep track of everyone I'm supposed to denounce. I know Sidney Powell to be an excellent lawyer, and the allegations she was making would have been fine if she was a leftist for any judge. Certainly she wouldn't have been sanctioned, and certainly she wouldn't be thrown into the outer dark by the establishment class. She'd be a hero and be running for governor in Georgia.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're
so, Michael, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then I got to move on.
So, I mean, I don't care if you're left, right, or a gorilla. If you put out the insanity that she put out under the auspices of some sort of legal filing, then your
Michael,
whole essence needs to be questioned.
Well, when you say it's insanity, that just tells me you're not fairly treating the content you develop.
I did.
Now, you call it insanity. It's obviously not insanity. She's a lawyer who put forward in good faith allegations she thought she could prove in court and wanted a chance to prove in court. To say it's insanity is not a fair analysis.
Yeah. So, I'm going to bring in Jack Posobiec. Welcome back to the stage, man. What do you think of everything you've heard so far?
Hey, well, I have to admit that I wasn't totally on for the full discussion, other than Tom and Michael Tracy and a little bit of
I'm sure there's plenty to respond to that, though.
and Brandon. I mean, no, but I mean, I was just kind of wanted to get in on the overall topic and just appreciate everyone's contributions. Mike Tracy, great reporting on Ukraine as always. And of course, Judicial Watch, and just everybody. I'm a huge fan of a lot of the people in here. So I just, I guess, wanted to respond to the initial question, if that makes sense.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. So, just looking at some of the polling lately, that there are some very reputable mainstream polls. I don't, forgive me if this has come up already, that have been out in just the past couple of days where Trump is absolutely dominating. Harvard Harris, Emerson, things that people, this isn't like, something that I'm like, oh, I've got to go search deep into the bowels of Twitter for or something. This is, Harvard University, right? Where they've got him over Biden by 5. They got him over DeSantis in pretty much every primary poll that I've seen. I think there were a few that popped up that looked like he, it was a little bit closer, but he is actually increasing that gap at this point. So, and really, when I think about it, it's like when I go around the country, I go to places in Western Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio. They've still got Trump signs up all over the place. And I just don't see those people, certainly in that, and particularly in that part of the country, going with anyone else right now. I think that something I've learned from, covering so many Trump rallies and going to so many different places is that they really view him as somebody who has their back, and they have this sort of emotional investment in him as a candidate, because they feel that for all these years, he's really spoken to them in terms of really the difference between a working class, middle class kind of background that's been just completely decimated, particularly in that part of the country, but also in areas of the South and others. And they view what he said about trade going back to the 1980s, or going back even just to NAFTA in the 1990s, as been something that they've really been focused on for so long. Whereas when you look at most other Republicans out there, they're more focused on, are we going to, defeat the Russians? Are we going to lower taxes for corporate businesses? And, Trump is sort of nominally Republican on all those other things, but I really do think that trade and immigration are the two issues that won for him in 2016. And agreed, by the way, that there's a lot of noise out there, but if he really focuses on those two issues, I don't think anyone beats him.
So Jack, I do want to ask you this real quick. The poll you were citing, the Harvard-Harris poll, it has Trump at 48, DeSantis at 28, Mike Pence at 7. If DeSantis announces for president,
by the way, I don't think Pence is at 7. I don't think. Actually, I was on War Room yesterday, and I said I don't even think Mike Pence is his own wife's first choice.
Ooh, that's cold, man. That's cold.
For president.
Yeah. So, but if DeSantis does announce for president, how much do you see that margin tightening?
Oh, the margin. Oh, just if it's a. Well, that's the thing is.
Well, not with Pence, but Trump.
Right. No. I think what. No, I think that what you're going to see is it's not going to be a one-on-one race. I do think, and I've said this before, that I predict that the 2024 primary, at least on the Republican side, is going to look a lot more like the 2016 primary than it does the 2020. I mean, there wasn't a 2020 primary. Whereas on the Democrats, Joe Biden is more than likely going to be fielding some primary challenges of his own, even as a sitting president. You saw this happen with Jimmy Carter in 1980, for example, with Ted Kennedy.
Who's running against Biden?
Joe Manchin, of course, has obviously was on Meet the Press this weekend and basically, did that politician thing of I refused to deny that I would run, that kind of thing, left it open. Gavin Newsom, of course, I think is somebody who's really chomping at the bit. I think he's
not going to primary Biden.
It's no great secret that he wants to run, though, if Biden doesn't. It's no great secret that he wants
to. If he doesn't, but he's not going to primary Biden.
So guys, can I...
So Jack,
let me ask you...
But Manchin certainly could. Manchin, Sinema. And on the Republican side, I just think it's kind of you're looking at a potential free-for-all. Pompeo, Nikki Haley, certainly DeSantis, I think would be a strong challenger. Who's that?
Can I just ask, guys, for the
Chris
Republicans
Christie,
in the room,
yeah,
in
Chris Christie,
particular,
even, yeah.
Guys, let me
and Larry Hogan every once in a while mentions.
Let me just ask this question for the Republicans in the room: Is Trump going to be? Is Trump, in your opinion, the better presidential candidate, the better president, or is he just better at playing the game? And it would be very difficult for people to play his game because it just wouldn't be convincing from other candidates. So really just a general question. Do people feel that Trump would make the best president, or is he just better at this game than everybody else on the Republican side?
This is Tom. Let me be clear here, and I'm not endorsing any candidacy here. President Trump was the most consequential president in modern American history. I know folks have pointed to DeSantis's reforms and efforts in Florida, many of which are admirable and I support. But in terms of the quantity and impact of policy changes in Washington, Trump is second to none. The regulatory reforms that he was able to implement in the first year or two would have satisfied 8 years of conservative hopes in prior administrations. There's nothing comparable to Trump out there among the current crop of candidates in terms of policy accomplishments, including, I would dare add, saving countless unborn human beings, which generations will venerate him for because of his Supreme Court picks. And so I think that's something that we got to calculate. And I've been surprised, although I shouldn't be, that he's already grabbed the hold of leadership on policy with several initiatives that show that him and his people around him aren't sitting on their laurels, and they plan for significant impacts again if he was to be reelected. It's a remarkable political story that we don't want to talk about, or many in DC don't want to talk about, because Orange Man is bad, to use the trope.
Jack, how would you answer the same question?
Well, I do think that there is a very strong argument for Trump, particularly in terms of, if you caught my framing earlier, of those Rust Belt states. I mean, these are states that many on the right or the Republican side had basically written off. I mean, certainly Pennsylvania was one of them where you didn't see a lot of money dumped into at the national level. Michigan, Wisconsin, I don't even think anyone thought Wisconsin was on the map. Now, of course, in 24, Republicans have announced that they will be holding the RNC, the Republican National Convention, not the committee meeting, which is later this week out in California, where they're, it's going to be either Harmeet or Dillon. I'm talking about the 2024 convention will be in Wisconsin. So there is this great possibility that, he did it once. Can he do it again? I don't particularly see anyone else in the field who can do that.
Great. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Because I think it's an important part of the conversation.
Yeah, quick thought on that. My working theory on Trump, and I'm actually curious what Jack thinks about this, in terms of his prospects in the 2024 primaries, is that I do think there's a bit of a distortion in the popular view of his strength, because there's a lot of people in right-leaning media who definitely do not view Trump as their top choice, right? So think of people who work for magazines, or maybe who are kind of style themselves a bit more on the intellectual wing of the conservative sort of media ecosystem, where they're a bit fed up with the baggage of Trump and the chaos, and even if they kind of accommodate themselves to his more nationalistic kind of breed of conservatism, they don't have him as necessarily the person that they want to spend another 4 years doing
carrying
spend
the water
another 4 years in the company of, right? So that's going to contribute to the sort of construction of a narrative that I think would tend to downplay Trump's historically unique strengths as a candidate. He's going to be a quasi-incumbent president running in a primary. You build up an enormous, unrivaled amount of political capital merely by dint of having been president for 4 years. Remember, when you're president, the RNC is basically your own personal political operation. So it's not as though that could just be vanquished from him. And I'm not saying that the RNC is necessarily going to, tilt the scales on his behalf, although who knows. But
according to their
point
bylaws,
is, he has a huge amount of political cachet that just cannot be rivaled. And so, if you layer on top of that, and there are many other reasons for why I think that he's underappreciated in terms of how formidable he would be in a Republican primary, and some of this speculation is really just sort of a parlor game about other candidates, because you don't want it to be a foregone conclusion. You want a little bit of excitement, and that's what the media incentives are going to be. Who's up, who's down. You want people to click on you want there to be dramatic twists and narrative sort of devices. That's going to be the MO. But Trump is ultimately he was a mega popular among Republicans president who received the most votes of any person ever, other than Biden. Now, leaving aside questions of fraud or what have you, just looking at the official totals, 2020. I mean, he just has to siphon off a very small percentage of that and bring it with him in a primary. He sails through, and not to mention, he can say rightly that he delivered on the 5-decade yearning of conservative evangelical voters in particular, but not just limited them, but heavily concentrated them in terms of what issue animates them most, of overturning Roe versus Wade, which is humongous. So there are a lot of evangelical Christians who are going to see Trump as the person who actually, for once, in contrast with every other Republican on the planet, delivered on their singular kind of both theological and political desire. And that kind of forces an attachment that I don't think other candidates really have a chance in hell of matching.
Jack next, and then Tira afterwards, because I think we need to hear some alternatives. So, Jack, if you can come in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I would agree with the sort of undervaluing that's there. And as far as this sort of conservative intelligentsia, if there even is one in America, that sort of the magazine writer, laptop class Republicans, I mean, they weren't with him in 16. Those very same people, in some cases, the very same individuals were all completely against Trump. Yeah, Rubio, Cruz, take your pick. I mean, they were all against him at the time, and that actually made him better. But I will say this: I don't think Trump should have a coronation. I think there should be a vigorously contested primary. I want to see people get to fight this out. I want to get into these vaccine issues. I want to get into the election integrity issues, all of it. I want to get into every single piece of it. I want to see attacks on Trump from the left. I want to see attacks on Trump from the right, because we saw this in the speaker's race just a few weeks ago, that you do ultimately end up with a better product.
Okay, Tara, do you want to come in?
Sure. Can Trump win in 2024? I think he can win the primary for sure. I think that is going to be the most Trump supporters will be in the primary, in the primaries, and I definitely feel he will win if he continues to want to be president. In terms of the election, I think Trump has always been his own worst advocate in many ways. People have sort of forgotten because Truth Social is really not that big of a platform, and also because nobody's paying as much attention to his daily tweets, his daily insults, his daily sort of going against the grain of many people. So what you have to also understand is if Donald Trump is the nominee, that brings out the Democrats who hate him. And there are many, that is in fact why he lost the election, in my view, not love for Biden, but literally loathing for Donald Trump. And that loathing is still there, and he will feed it because he sort of can't stop himself. He will tweet incessantly. I'm very happy as a Democrat that he's being let back onto Facebook and Instagram, because I think the more he is public with his feelings, the better it is for Democrats, because he can be quite, let's just say, he can seem unbalanced in many ways. I want to say one thing about election fraud. Let me just finish, okay? There was no significant election fraud. Now, you can talk about standing all you want, etc. In fact, most of Trump's lawyers did not even claim fraud when they went into courts. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because lawyers don't like to claim things that are untrue, that they know are untrue, because they can get censured, as in fact many of Trump's lawyers have been, as Sidney Powell has been, etc. The Dominion stuff is nonsense. In fact, what do we know? How do we know it's nonsense? Well, we sort of know it's nonsense because when Dominion has sued Fox News, Barterimo, all those people, none of them has claimed truth as a defense. Nobody has sort of said, oh, no, it's true. What they've done is said things like, well, we didn't have to investigate. We didn't have to look into this. We didn't, et cetera. But they're not saying it's true because it isn't true. Literally, almost all the facts, quote, facts that Trump ever alleged have been disproven. Suitcases under the table, nonsense. Sharpies in Arizona, nonsense. Out-of-state trucks, yes, they were hired to bring ballots from one place to the other. All of these things have been disproven. There is nothing left. Now you're down to 2,000 mules. Now I'm talking about actual fraud, which is what Trump alleged. I'm not talking about influence. I'm not talking about Twitter. I'm talking about actual fraud. This is nonsense, and he will not win this claim. He has convinced Republicans, but he hasn't convinced anyone else. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Tara. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah. So I definitely, Brandon, can you respond to that point, or should we defer to Jack on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely can. And in fact, she kind of teed me up perfectly. If it's all right, I'd like to just make a couple really quick points that I was going to make earlier, which she perfectly set me up for. Jack made and by the way, I want to make my position really clear here. I absolutely want a Republican to, I need a Republican to, I probably, of anybody on this speaker's box, I have a more vested interest in getting a Republican into office because of the situation that I'm currently in. Like, we cannot have a Democrat win again. So when I bring up different things about Trump, it's only because I'm trying to look for the holes that exist right now that people are not looking at and that people are not seeing, so that we can fill those holes so that we can have victory. Bear in mind, I'm a person who was behind Hillary Clinton in 2016. I threw my support behind her. She lost. I threw all my support behind Donald Trump in 2020, and he didn't win the election. And what ended up happening is that in both of those situations, I feel like people were focusing so much on signs of some sort of validation that they were going to be victorious, that they missed a lot of things. I think we missed how unpopular Trump had become with suburban women. And I think that was very, very significant. And I think that when, Jack makes comments like going into these communities and seeing all these Trump signs, I mean, I don't disagree with Jack whatsoever, but I'm more interested in the MAGA people who don't have Trump signs in their yards. What are they thinking, and what is it going to take to sway them so that we can start winning elections again? And so the few points that I want to make is that, number one, what's different now than it was in 2015, 2016 is that Donald Trump has become a political superstar. He's not the same guy who was doing rallies in airplane hangars for a couple of hundred people and growing this movement at a grassroots level. He's become untouchable and inaccessible to most of the people in this country. And the people in this country need him. They need a hero. People are suffering. People are scared. And I think that we've gotten to this point where he's doing these rallies for 20,000 people or 30,000 people, but he doesn't feel real to people anymore. And I would like to see the guy start doing rallies again in airplane hangars. I would like to see him get on Twitter Spaces and start talking directly with people and answering their questions. I think he's become a king-like figure that, again, is completely untouchable and inaccessible to people. And the other thing is, to the point of Tira, sorry, I think that's your name. I'm very concerned about the fact that I'm not being shown signs that he's learned a lot of lessons. And the things that I loved about him, I'm one of those people, I loved his mean tweets. I loved his attitude. I love all of that. So I love the way he fires away at the press. I love all of it. But I don't think it's going to work anymore. And I don't think it's going to serve us well anymore. And when I watched him come out and announce that he was running for president again, I was really disappointed, because what I wanted to see more than anything was a total rebranding, like a total coming out and saying, this is the message going forward. Throw away the red hats, throw away the MAGA hats. Let's come up with a new slogan, a new motto, something more inclusive, something that brings all Americans together under one message and one big tent. But I feel like we're just going to repeat the same the same techniques, the same style, the same message as before, and I don't think it's going to work again. I'm not against.
So that's really interesting, Brandon. So do other people agree with that? Do they agree that the old Trump style that won him previously may not work again? What do people think?
I agree. It's not going to work again. I think that there are people who are exhausted. The corporate press and the Democratic Congress, they've exhausted everybody or this whole subgroup of people from Donald Trump. And those are the ones that maybe are leaning more toward DeSantis or leaning more toward, I don't know, Mike Pence. I don't know. But
what's the basis for that other than your personal opinion?
The basis is there
data showing that Trump is unlikely to be the victor if he goes up against Biden in a significant way? Is there data showing that he wouldn't win the primaries? I understand why that might be someone's personal instinct, but
it's my
Trump seems to be doing pretty darn well considering everything he's been through. I mean, to me, politically, what's interesting is how powerful his brand is, despite the attacks and obviously the political moment of a primary he's facing. He seems to be doing remarkably well. And, folks may be personally, I think we have to be careful to say, well, I don't like this tweet or this is frustrating versus, well, how's it playing with regular folks and voters, and what is the data showing? And I'm not seeing much downside there. Yeah, I'm just making a point. That's fine.
Okay. All right.
I'm interacting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I was going to say I'm the redheaded libertarian, so my circle, if you will, is a lot of libertarians, and libertarians can go any way. So when I'm saying this, it's not an opinion; it's an observation from interacting with the many people who follow my page and who weigh in on topics. And with libertarians, it's split relatively equally between Trump and DeSantis. So this is an observation just from where I stand and what I do and living my life. So it's not like I don't have an opinion really either way. Like I said, I want DeSantis to stay governor of Florida because I believe in states' rights is going to be the way forward, and we have to really strengthen our states. And I voted for him for my governor, not for my president.
Jack,
can you
hang on, Tom? Let's get Jack in here.
I have a question. I just one question to everyone. I'd like weigh in on if they can. There's this presumption DeSantis is going to run. I don't know if that's a presumption we can fairly make.
Can I say something before Jack jumps in?
Sure, Seth. Yep, sure, Dr. Gorka.
Yeah. So let's be cognizant of the fact that most people in America don't go on Twitter Spaces.
So you know,
not yet, not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Soon.
Tom Fitton's point is really the point, and also Jack's about, you know, why the hell do people still have Trump signs up 2 years later? There's a reason, and this election will not be decided by anybody on this Twitter call who is a libertarian or a dispossessed Trump supporter who's can't stand his mean tweets or his comb over or whatever. It's going to be decided by people who want to have baby formula for their kid. It's going to be decided by the plumber who's got the F-150 who can't afford $4 gas in his state, right? That's where it's going to be decided. So we're focusing on the man, and you know what? It's not going to be decided by the man. It's going to be decided fundamentally by the state of the economy and whether Putin drops a tactical, you know, bomb on Kyrgyzstan, right? A tactical nuke. It's going to be exogenous circumstances. It's going to be the environment. It's going to be the economy, stupid. And he will get the, if he, you know, let's have a primary. Nobody, I agree with Jack. We don't do anointing here in America. It's going to be super fun. Whoever goes up against him, we're going to have new nicknames. He doesn't really have to rebrand because the brand is America. That's why he won. If you love America, you're going to vote for President Trump, mean tweets or not, or whether he's back on Facebook or not. It's really going to be the state of the economy, a little bbit of geopolitics thrown in, and the fact that he's still seen as the outsider. The reason those signs are up in Wilkes-Barre, in Scranton, in South Dakota, those signs are up because he is still, so strangely, despite 4 years in the Oval Office, not deemed by his supporting base to be a politician. That's DeSantis's big problem. The fact that DeSantis was actually a congressman who nobody had heard of for 4.5 years before he ran for governor. He's a part of the swamp. He's a politician, and Donald Trump is still not measured amongst that category.
But wait, but Seb,
well,
sorry, Brandon, I gotta get Jack in here.
I wanted to. It's actually great because Dr. Gorka just said something that essentially was similar to what I was going to say to Josie, and sort of speak to the libertarians, but also in a broader statement, is that one of the best arguments for Trump that I can see right now on the table is exactly, and something that I think that libertarians would totally be on board for, which goes exactly to what Dr. Gorka just said, is that we are facing the real threat of nuclear escalation in Ukraine right now, combined with a potential escalation in vis-a-vis the Taiwan Straits with China, the CCP, et cetera. And so you actually need someone who has the credible resume to go forward and say, I will wind these things down peacefully rather than escalate to the point where anyone is using nuclear weapons. Now, he has the deterrence ability because everybody knows that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know whether he's going to tweet something or he's going to turn an Iranian general into Pico de Gallo the next day. But at the same time, he's the only president that we've had in 50 years or so that hasn't started a new war. And I think that the very real threat of a nuclear holocaust, which, you know, I don't know if there's any Green members, Green family, Green Party types on here. I don't know what the carbon footprint of nuclear war is. Probably not good, though it may be neutral if you consider that it wipes out humanity.
What's the carbon footprint of Abrams tanks?
with or well, what about the uranium depleted rounds on the Bradleys? You know, and this idea that, you know, we just nonchalantly throw around these terms like potential nuclear war, but Dr. Gorka is exactly right. We are talking about the use of tactical nukes, which eventually turns into long range nukes, which just, you know, everybody's dead. So I'd rather have somebody who doesn't necessarily have any of that neocon baggage, who actually does have a resume that he can stand on of being a peace president for come in there, be there for 4 years, and then that's our system. Then it's open seat. And Josie, to your point, I think that's something that I would go say that to you. I'd say that to Scott Horton. I'd say that to any of my libertarian friends, that I don't think there's any other Republican anywhere near the field who can say the same.
But Jack, let's face it, Trump does have neocon baggage. That's the way you want to put it. Insofar as who was the member of Trump's cabinet who probably was most skillful in insinuating himself with Trump, staying in his good graces, never had a giant sort of dramatic fallout with him, and had an outsized policy impact on his decision making. Had to be Mike Pompeo, or Mike Pompeo was at least up there. And if Mike Pompeo is not
but Mike's going to run against
representative of the neocon sort of a tendency within the Republican Party, I don't know who is. And you can name, a battery of other examples of people who were around him. I mean, why is it that Lindsey Graham? I still don't understand this. Lindsey Graham, who I talked to about it at the America First Policy Institute conference over the summer in Washington, D.C. Lindsey Graham is the most stalwart advocate of Trump running again, and had been for a year before Trump technically announced it after the midterm. So why is it that Lindsey Graham sees his sort of foreign policy portfolio as so easily compatible with Trump's? That's not something I feel like is really adequately sussed out. So I'm curious what you think about that. And also, just another quick point on DeSantis. Because,
I think a lot of that is just opportunism.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe, but you don't think Lindsey Graham feels he has some ideological affinity with Trump? You don't think that he feels comfortable with Trump sort of delivering on sort of the thrust of his agenda if he were to be back in the White House? I mean, I think that's what Lindsey Graham prioritizes. He's a zealot on foreign policy.
Well, I think it's really opportunism in the sense that he thinks Trump will probably win the nomination, and therefore he wants to be in Trump's good graces. But Trump's also been very openly friendly with Rand Paul, who is pretty much the exact opposite, strategy, and certainly in terms of policy for foreign policy. And in fact, they used to go golfing together, and would sort of would joke that if it'd say, if Lindsey misses this putt, he's going to put a drone strike on the clubhouse. So I'm not saying that it's that the neocon baggage is zero, and certainly with Pompeo, but also would note that Pompeo is most likely going to run against him. But no, certainly I don't mean to say that it's zero tendency towards any sort of foreign intervention. Trump is not a libertarian, and I don't think he's ever said that he is. But when you compare him to any other potential Republican challenger or Republican contender, I mean, he's far closer to that type of foreign policy.
And this is the type of talking points that you need to get the libertarians on board, because you've seen what libertarians are capable of when it comes to states elections and splitting votes, as unpopular as that is within libertarian. And they say, oh, they just sort of put up a better candidates. No, when a vote is split, it's always split one way, and it's usually because of libertarians. So in order to get the libertarians on board, the biggest thing for us right now is nuclear war. We're a very anti-war group of people. So anything like that, anything that I can take back to my base, anything that I can take back to my followers about anti-war is what's going to sell them on the future. Because I mean, even if you look at, for instance, Herschel Walker losing, that meant that Rand Paul couldn't head the health committee in the Senate. Like, that was a big deal. That we needed that to happen. We needed to hold Fauci accountable. But it's things like that libertarians are going to have to listen more to moving forward, is the consequences that we might not see on a large scale, but the small ones that are going to make the biggest difference.
So Josie, let me ask you that real quick. Do you believe that Trump can get the libertarian support this time? Because obviously we saw a big swing toward the libertarian candidate in 2020. Is that something that we're going to see change a little bit, or do you think that that's going to be a problem for him in 2024?
It will depend on the libertarian candidate. We had a horribly unpopular libertarian candidate last time, Jo Jorgensen.
Remind us, who was that?
Jo
Jorgensen. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, she was like a leftist in sheep's clothing. I didn't really care for her.
What's up with all these woke libertarians? I thought libertarians used to be cool, and the Mises Caucus guys seem cool, but man,
but what about
so
Spike Cohen? I love Spike Cohen.
Spike is wonderful. Spike is wonderful. So what had happened is there was a movement to kind of usurp the Libertarian Party and turn it into like this progressive, like left wing, you see the political spectrum, the left bottom box is kind of like the green libertarians. And the Mises Caucus, the Mises Caucus, they went in there and they got all those people out. So now the libertarians that are heading this place are the Thomas Masseys and the Rand Pauls. So those are the people who are in charge of the libertarian faction now. So depending on who the candidate is, there's a chance like it could be Dave Smith, who's very well-loved comedian and incredible speaker, funny guy, just incredible libertarian. It could be him, and that would be a problem when it comes to a national election for Donald Trump. If it's anybody else, then there's definitely more of a chance. It's about being pragmatic. I'm pragmatic when it comes to voting. I vote for who is the most libertarian that can win, because communism is the biggest threat. It is the ultimate threat, and it is here. And so I vote against communism essentially. So I'm not like a party.
Wait, communism is here? When did that happen?
When did communism get here?
Critical race
Yeah,
theory.
nobody notified me.
Critical race theory, Michael. Read up on it.
We've had lots of audience. We've had lots of audience questions. We know the people listening really like to have the opportunity to ask you guys questions. So please get us more questions. You can tap on the bottom right-hand corner to ask us a question. Keep them short. Keep them to one sentence. So we've had a couple about which are quite related. We'll see what you guys think.
Best way to do it, by the way, is tag Sam and I in those questions.
Yeah, and do keep them short because people tend to write multi-paragraph questions and they're hard to read. So we'll talk about the women's vote and also about Michelle Obama as a threat. So two questions really that may be related. Will the women's vote impact 24 in terms of Republican or Democrat? Do we believe that's relevant with Trump? And also talk about how Obama, this is from the Coin Dad, Obama was a very popular president. We've never had a black female president. Would Michelle be a threat to Trump? So does anyone believe that Michelle Obama would actually be a direct threat to Trump?
Sebastian here. I am always amused by the callers into my show, anybody else on social media, conservative or otherwise, who actually for a nanosecond take seriously the concept that Michelle Obama is going to run for public office. I will bet anything. I will bet my mortgage. I will bet my gun collection. It ain't happening. The idea that she'd actually have to work for a living, I guarantee you now, the idea that she's going to leave Martha's Vineyard is never, ever happening.
Yeah, she's smarter than you, Seb. I mean, like, come on. There's no need to disrespect her saying she has to work for something.
It's
She's
probably
like
going to be stupid.
So is that your argument? Is the ad hominem, right?
No. You wait. First off, you ad homed her first. You said, "Oh, the idea that she has."
I didn't know. Ad hominem is the conversation.
Oh, please,
She's not on
Seb.
the conversation.
Come on, man. Let's not play games here.
I stand by what I said. I stand by what I said. Put your money where your mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is.
On what?
On betting. What are you prepared to bet that she's running?
I never said she was. See, maybe you don't know what you actually said.
Then you're wasting everybody's time.
Okay.
No,
okay,
I was just calling out.
Right,
I was just calling out the fact that you were criticizing.
Does anybody
her
else
for
have opinions on that? And let's talk about the women's vote as well. Like, do people believe that Trump will get the women's vote overall? What's people's opinion?
I actually, and I think Tom may have spoken on this earlier, so apologize if he did, but I think that the Republicans are starting at a disadvantage with every demographic right now because of the changes in the way that the elections are run in so many states, from my home state of Pennsylvania to Arizona to Wisconsin and others. I think that if Republicans do not put this idea of early balloting and early voting, ballot harvesting where it's legal in so many of these states, and get a serious operation in place with actual money behind it, it doesn't really matter who the candidate is, because the Democrats are absolutely crushing Republicans when it comes to that, with TikTok get out the vote operations and passing your vote nights and all of these different things. I saw it happen in Pennsylvania, and they crushed Republicans up and down the ticket. Now, Trump does bring out another type of voter. That's sort of like a single Obama. We saw this with Obama as well. They're just a single candidate voter. They come out and vote for Trump, or they just came out and vote for Obama, and they might lean in on some of the other races as well, certainly. But I really think that if Republicans want to be competitive, they need to go all in on a nationwide, play. I think Lee Zeldin said it right. If you're in a state where it's already legal, you need to go all in. If you're a state where it's not illegal or not legal, you need to keep it that way.
Tom?
Yeah, I disagree. I think ballot harvesting is fool's gold. It's designed to allow the left to collect illegal votes and engage in fraud. So unless Republicans decide to do that, they're always going to be on the losing side of that. So I would.
But what about states where it's already legal?
Yeah, exactly. It's legal because they've changed the laws, expanded it, the ability to do that in certain states to increase their ability to engage in fraud. So that's a
well, if they're increasing their vote share, wouldn't Republicans want to do the same thing if it's already legal in that state? That's all I'm saying.
Well,
if the tactic is working, you want to keep doing it.
Well, you're assuming the tactic is allowing them to get these votes through proper channels, and I'm suggesting that ballot harvesting inherently is corrupt and fraudulent, and there's no safe check on it, and you're never going to win that game. Now, do you completely accede to the other side? But you're just so far away from normal elections by pretending that you can engage in ballot harvesting. But I don't want to get too distracted by that because this is all just tactical. If someone wants to go the way you suggest, Jack, that's fine. That's a political question in the end that isn't necessarily principled per se. With the women vote, that's code for abortion. And the question for Republicans, are they going to embrace the right to life, or are they going to be made nervous about it as a result of, the media culture and the political culture in this country? And the dirty little secret is that too many Republican leaders are not as comfortable with the right to life as you might think. And certainly the consultant class thinks it's radioactive. So unless Republicans start embracing the right to life in a comprehensive way that appeals to voters, and I think there are many unique ways, many opportunities there in that regard, and we can get into that. That's going to be a challenge for them, that pro-life issue, because if you're unwilling to defend life and talk about it, why would those interested in the issue come out and talk to you and vote for you? Because it used to be that the right to life issue worked for Republicans because pro-lifers were extremely committed on the issue. If you're not giving them a reason in a post-Roe world to be committed on the issue, they will lose that advantage. And obviously, the other big issue is money. They didn't have the money last term in terms of certainly the abortion issue, because the left went all in on that. And, that's again a tactical decision. So between the money and the failure of nerve, it's going to be a challenge.
Tom, what are you defining as ballot harvesting
Michael,
exactly?
Michael, sorry, 1 second. Heather's been so patient for quite a long time trying to get on there. Heather, are you able to?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your patience.
Thanks so much for bringing me on. It's crazy listening to everyone talk. I mean, I have especially on the election stuff, those of you that know me, I've spent the better part of the last 2 years of my life investigating all the election fraud that happened in 2020, everything from the voting machines, the ballot harvesting, the lawsuits that do actually exist. And so, for me, I think let me start off with Trump. I think because Trump has been the leading voice on a lot of this corruption that we've seen exposed over time, I think ultimately Trump has the truth on his side. And in a primary, more and more stuff keeps coming out that Trump was right about all along, including the election fraud. So I can give a perfect example of one of the cases that's still open to this day. It's a federal lawsuit out of Georgia called Curling v. Raffensperger. Now, this lawsuit actually started before the 2020 election by a group that was suing against the Dominion voting machines. The federal judge in that lawsuit actually ruled that the machines were unconstitutional. For one reason, you can't actually determine if the QR code accurately reflects your vote. But then two, what else came out in this lawsuit was a 25,000 word report by a professor from the University of Michigan named Alex Halderman. He actually wrote a report on how you can hack and flip votes and manipulate these voting machines as part of this federal lawsuit. The judge was about to release a redacted version to the public when the federal government's top cybersecurity agency, previously led by Chris Krebs, actually weighed in and said, well, we're going to review this report. We're going to look it over, work with Dominion to develop potential mitigation strategies and come back. And after a few months of working with Dominion, the federal government weighed in and said, yes, these machines could be exploited. And basically the Haldeman report was true, but they claim there is, quote unquote, no evidence of such having happened in 2020. But the only way to know would be to do a forensic audit on all of the voting machines that were used, which they were used in over 16 different states and various counties. So this is sort of like an uninvestigated potential for fraud. And in this same federal lawsuit, there were documents that were obtained through discovery that actually show the Georgia Secretary of State contracted with a cybersecurity company on 2 occasions for a potential breach of the system. So once in 2019 and once in 2020. So this is just one tiny example of the actual issues with the 2020 election that I've spent my life documenting. And I would caution anybody who hasn't paid close attention to not base your determination of whether or not there was election fraud from the same news sources that were telling you the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation and all of these other things, right? Like the big lie is in fact the big lie, and this is going to come out over time. I already know it. If you're not an election denier at this point, I say it's because you haven't been paying attention, but I'm happy to bring people up to speed. And I'll end with this. I think Stacey Abrams is going to be the nomination for the Democrats because she's been campaigning all across the country, even though she claims she's running for governor, and she's been rubbing elbows with some of the big names like Michelle Obama.
Thank you, Heather. So let's go to Tom and then to Harry to respond. Tom, are you available then?
Yeah, I think she's raising issues about election fraud, and I don't know the detail, right? But the challenge is that from the left perspective, and this shows you the dishonesty in the debate, is that they want to jail you if you dispute the 2020 election. I mean, President Trump's been warned by Facebook, if he raises questions about the legitimacy, I think, of the next election, the threat reads he'll be taken out. And Google, they will take your video down if you suggest that fraud had a material impact on the election. So this is a case of a government incumbent, the Biden administration, being helped with companies we know they're in bed with. We know that from Twitter, to rig the election in 2024. I mean, that's the question. If we can't raise reasonable concerns about the security of our elections and the policies around it, ballot harvesting in California, for instance, it's completely unregulated. Anyone can do it. There's no check on who does it or how many they take. It's a free-for-all. It's anarchy. And we're not allowed to question the results of an election that's conducted under such rules. Spare me. And we now know the Justice Department is targeting state officials and citizens who were pursuing alternative electors under the system of laws that have been placed for 150 years in this country. So these are not idle issues in the sense that that it's a mockery. That we should just pretend these issues don't exist. They're so important that the left is willing to put us in jail for raising them. And every time you hear January 6th, just remember that is a code for let's jail our political opponents for disputing an election that half the country has concerns about.
Yeah, so Harry, I'll let you respond to that, and then I want to jump into Scott, who just joined the panel. So go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was funny what Tom said at the end, that January 6th is code for jailing our political opponents. No, it's code for people who broke laws, right? These people trespassed. These people, broke very clear, set out laws. They were in buildings they weren't supposed to do. They broke windows and things like that. I mean, they trespassed, and and before anybody goes, oh, BLM riots, yes, I'm against violent protests in any form. But I guess my question was to Heather. Heather, two things. Have you won any of the lawsuits that allege voter fraud, and if not, why?
So there have been arrests made for election fraud for a while now. In fact, last year, a former congressman pled guilty to election fraud in Pennsylvania. I believe his name was Congressman Ozzie Myers. The DOJ put out a press release about it, and apparently he cheated in every single year, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, but not 2020. So I don't know if that was part of the plea or whatever the case may be, but Pennsylvania specifically has a long history of election fraud. This former congressman pled guilty to election bribery, bribing judges, stuffing ballot boxes, fraudulent voter rolls. The list goes on. He was a Democrat. He was doing it for Democrats. That's one documented case of election fraud, right? As far as 2020, I personally broke a story out of Floyd County, Georgia, where their hand recount found 2,700 votes that weren't counted the first time. The two people handling ballots, which I've documented on video that day, right? Like when they were troubleshooting, trying to figure out why these votes weren't counted, the two people, one was a man named Eric Thompson. The second one was the chief elections clerk named Robert Brady. Eric Thompson worked for Dominion. He was one of the technicians that was there that day. Eric Thompson also happened to be Kamala Harris's campaign photographer, right? So a couple of questions. One, how does the Dominion technician not know how to properly run the machines? And two, why is that not a conflict of interest? Why, when they were doing these special grand jury investigations in Fulton County, was Eric Thompson not brought in and deposed? Why was he not brought in for questioning? So there's a lot of these cases. I could literally give you hundreds of examples of clear either conflicts of interest as far as fraud, right? 2,000 Mules, which, some people, 2,000 Mules, here's what's important about that, right? Regardless of the actual movie, the cell phone data, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation verified and put out a statement saying they received it from the FBI that was given to it by Greg Phillips, the lead investigator. They verified the authenticity of the data. And in their press release, they said the data without witnesses does not rise to the level of probable cause to do any sort of warrants, right? Where they would get the identities of the mules from the phone companies. Well, this was before the ballot Dropbox footage was made available that does correspond with the cell phone pings, right? So this is verifiable data, regardless of what you read in the media. That's one example of clear illegal crime happening on camera.
Yeah, but Heather, like you did a fine job of citing like individual instances, of which some are lacking context, but I digress. You've cited individual instances, but of course there's individual instances of voter fraud around the United States. Like nobody's alleging that there's zero voter fraud. There's just not widespread. So why haven't any of the widespread voter fraud claims won in court up until this point?
So
like I request that you don't. I request that you don't just like cite individual examples.
So the federal government's top cybersecurity agency came out and said that machines that were used in over 16 different states in the 2020 election were capable of being hacked and exploited. So do you support doing a forensic audit on all of those machines? Because that's what ultimately should have been done, but was not done, because there's clear documented examples of corruption on the part of leadership where people who had the ability to investigate this fraud decided to look the other way. And we all know that the Georgia Senate runoff races, for example, the winner of those races controlled the Senate. Do you know what that did to this country? Do you know how much money was at stake with the control of that Senate? So if you think there's not bribery, fraud, corruption, blackmail, and all the other disgusting, swampy things that come with the territory, you're naive. I mean, these elections control the most powerful country in the world. There's a lot at stake here, and there's several people. The Secretary of State in Georgia, for example, is corrupt to no end. I've caught him in lies. I've put it out on my Twitter. Follow my work. I honestly encourage you to follow my work.
Heather, if I could, Heather, like you're still not.
Harry, stop
repeating
the same talking point that
Tom,
election fraud wasn't.
if I may, Tom, if I may.
Well, hold on a second.
Well, Harry, let him respond, and then I'll let you respond to Tom.
Oh, but it's
Go
a
ahead,
back
Tom.
and forth between Heather and I.
Yeah. You know, Harry, you're repeating the same talking point that I blew up, that the courts decided there was no fraud. The courts didn't address the merits of that issue. And in fact, and it wasn't even merits on standing. It was the cases ended because they were mooted out. So there were substantial allegations of fraud that were not pursued in court as a result of the timing of the elections. And the standing was, unfortunately, the court said if you sue before the elections to try to protect the integrity of the elections, it's too soon. And if you sue after the elections, it's too late. And unfortunately, Trump's team couldn't navigate the state processes, legal processes, in a way to get adjudication prior to the decision making in the Electoral College and on January 6th.
Yeah, let me give you one more
Tom, but let me. So wait,
Heather, let Harry respond, and then it's all.
So yeah, if I could, like
that's a fact-based analysis, Harry. Talking points aren't going to be sufficient.
That is absolutely not a fact-based
analysis. It is. Everyone can check it out. You're just being silly, raising all these talking points without substance. I mean, you can't. You have to get into the 7 or 8.
Were rejected on standing.
You don't know what you're talking about, Harry. You're just saying
you have no
things.
Clue. Tom.
I don't have any clue.
Tom,
I'm a national expert on election law. I've testified before Congress. We've been involved in these cases for 25 years.
I don't quite.
I mean, Harry, come on. I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. Don't tell me I don't have any clue.
Tom, I can't say that I really care if you testified before Congress, because the idea that none of these cases were rejected. And Tom, if I can finish the sentence,
you're just echoing Democratic talking points. You're not dealing with the substance of the matter, Harry.
Yeah. Okay, Tom. Okay.
Well, you're not. But what? Am I wrong about Georgia? The court not appointing a judge to hear Trump's case until it was too late to adjudicate?
I am.
Okay, Tom.
I'm asking you. Am I wrong about it?
Stop.
I'm not going to stop. Am I wrong about it? You have something substantive to respond to.
I gotta let Harry respond, man.
All right, guys.
So the idea that none of these cases were rejected on standing is just false. There were plenty of cases rejected on standing. They had their time to present evidence, and there was no evidence of widespread voter fraud. And to this, and still, I have not gotten a reasonable explanation as to why the cases that were rejected on standing were rejected on standing by Trump supporters.
You're not merits, not standing.
You're wrong, Harry. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It has nothing to do with reality.
Why did the Supreme Court? Why did the Supreme Court not
Harry,
take it up,
are you aware that the Georgia Supreme Court just reversed a previous judge's decision and reopened a 2020 Georgia election lawsuit that was thrown out on standing, and now it's actually reopened because the Georgia Supreme Court ruled that it did in fact have standing, so it's going back. This is a lawsuit in Georgia to unseal and forensically analyze 147,000 absentee and mail-in ballots. They were the same ones that were being scanned in overnight at State Farm Arena. The video that went viral with Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who were recently, I guess, given an award by Joe Biden, some citizen award, right? They're the subject of this fraud. And what does Joe Biden do? He brings them down to DC and hands them a medal. Okay.
Yeah.
Heather, why didn't you mention the Republicans? Why didn't you mention any of the Republican election fraud? Why only Democratic?
What do you mean? Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, is a Republican, and he sure as heck didn't win legitimately. There's plenty of Republican elections.
And wait, can I? By the way, I just want to say that case in Georgia that's being reworked is not necessarily because the judges are like, oh my God, there's now voter fraud. It's just so that it can be litigated out. So
the judge,
crazy lunatics like yourself, lunatics.
All right, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, Tom. Because Tom, you're saying that none of these cases were rejected on standing, and that's just not true. Why did
I didn't say that, Harry? I didn't say that. I said Trump's campaign cases.
Then why were they?
There were 7. What I said was there were 7 or 8 campaign cases that ended because time ran out. They weren't rejected on standing. You're saying I'm wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And the issue is standing.
Can I pose a clarifying
You're suggesting that the standing is a credible reason for rejecting the other cases, and that's not true either. Harry, you're just echoing talking points. You're not responding substantively to the legal concerns here, where allegations were made of voter fraud by the Trump campaign. They weren't heard by the courts because the Trump campaign ran out of time.
Yeah, but plenty were rejected, right?
not by the Trump campaign. Third parties messing around isn't the same as the candidate litigating the substantive issues of fraud in the states at which the elections hinge, like in California or Nevada.
I'm just curious.
Excuse me, Georgia or Nevada, not California.
Harry, who do you
California, the Republicans set up fake ballot boxes and admitted to it. The Republicans set up fake ballot boxes and admitted to it. But you guys don't mention that, but you position yourself as an expert in election fraud. But
I am. Like in North Carolina, there was a Republican who engaged in fraud, and the court did the right thing. He ordered a new election, and that's why I think that should have been on the table for dealing with the ruined elections in 2020 in these key states.
So can I pose a quick clarifying question on this, the definitions being used here of terms? So Tom,
Sure,
you use the term ballot harvesting, right? You were in a little back and forth with Jack earlier, where he was suggesting that maybe Republicans need to just embrace ballot harvesting and, beat Democrats at their own game because they've mastered it in whatever states. Ballot harvesting, at least as I understand it, is not per se legal anywhere. I mean, ballot harvesting is the term used when there's illicit methods used to gather votes that violates any kind of adherence to a chain of custody. So what is ballot harvesting defined as exactly, if you're saying it's kind of systematically legal in certain places? And also, does it bleed into this broader critique of just the adjustments in election administration that you saw, pretty much across the board in 2020, where mail-in ballots became more widely available, and and there were broadened opportunities to vote in a variety of respects, because that, I think, is a trickier issue. So, for example, in Montana, and I looked into this very closely at the time, in Montana in 2020, not a competitive state on a national level in terms of the electoral college, but still, it's sort of interesting to look into. There was, like in many other states, a liberalization of mail-in balloting laws. So it was vastly easier for an average voter to get a mail-in ballot. Maybe the checks weren't as rigorous as might have done if it had been sort of implemented over a longer period of time and not because of COVID. But the end result was that Republican performance surged in Montana, partly, it would seem, as a function of more Republican-leaning voters being able to get mail-in ballots. So I think that there's this wrong-headed assumption that the greater availability of voting options automatically redounds to the benefit of Democrats, because you actually can find quite a few interesting countervailing examples, even potentially including California itself, which you say is like anarchic. But, even in 2022, in the midterms, there's sort of like a mini wave in California for Republicans where they won a bunch of closely contested seats, and where like even in Los Angeles County in a special election, I think it was in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I'm misremembering exactly, but in the very recent past, when this ballot harvesting situation was supposedly in full force in California, Republicans actually have won a couple of maybe surprising races. So if we could get a bit of clarity on how you define ballot harvesting, and then
there's a spectrum of the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a spectrum on the of ballot harvesting allowed. There's virtually, in some states, it's prohibited, practically speaking. Other states allow you to give it to a spouse or a family member, and other states limit the number of ballots you could bring in, maybe even for family members. There are 15 or 16 states where you can designate a third party, meaning someone that's not a family member or someone of that nature. And that's where you get into California territory, potentially, where you just have third parties collecting ballots from strangers, where opportunities for fraud permeate the transaction. There's no way of making sure no one's being intimidated, and other fraud isn't taking place. So to me, that's anathema, and that's a game. To the degree you want to try to use that to your political advantage, I guess parties are going to do what they're going to do. But from a policy perspective, much energy should be spent to end that inherently at a practice which is just open for abuse and is at odds with any notion of free and fair elections.
Okay, so we got to go around the horn. Yep, Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Tom, you say that Harry doesn't have any substantive arguments, but that's exactly what Trump didn't have. He at least 86 different judges from so many states, probably 30 states, Democrat appointed, Republican appointed, they all said that his lawsuits had no substance. And
that's right. You know, that's a talking
exactly
point. That's not true.
Let me just finish. 86 judges rejected his lawsuits claiming election fraud. 86.
I mean, it's gone from 62 to 86.
There were a total of 86 judges.
But the point is, you're just throwing out numbers, Brian. I mean, come on. You know, listeners. Listeners can easily go and check out what we're saying. They can look at the case that the Trump campaign filed, see how they were handled. They can see how the allegations were handled in the other cases, and they can figure out for themselves whether the judge treated them with appropriate deference or gave them the chance to prove their case in a credible way. I mean, the idea that this issue has been adjudicated, it is odds with the judicial record.
Let me just finish my point here. So 86 judges, 38 of them were appointed by Republicans. Now, not one judge found that any of these cases proved election fraud in any way in favor of Joe Biden. And you're saying that Harry hasn't provided anything.
Well, you're assuming those were allegations in all the cases, Brian. I mean, these are talking
let me
points.
finish my statement, then you can talk.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, you're just making a series of false characterizations of evidence. So my instinct is to interrupt, but forgive me.
So there's 38 Republican judges. Not one judge found any indication that there was substantial election fraud that favored Joe Biden that would have changed the results of the election. Now, it's up to the person claiming fraud to show that substance. It's not up to us to show that there wasn't election fraud, because the U.S. elections are some of the most secure elections on the planet. All indications from past elections, there's never been substantial fraud found. Most of the fraud goes on both sides. It usually equals out. It's usually within the dozens, maybe hundreds of votes. Joe Biden won by 7.2 million votes, was it? Across multiple states.
He didn't. He didn't. Under our system of government, he only won by tens of thousands of votes.
From a popular vote standpoint.
But that's a popular vote is not what our election is turns on, though.
So from an electoral college standpoint, it was 30,000 in one state.
That's the number. That's the number.
But
and Trump alleged fraud. Come on. You're just making stuff up, Brian. These are talking points.
Tom, let's let it finish, and we're going straight.
You know what I'm frustrated by?
Brian, finish your point, and then we'll go to Tom.
Yeah. So yeah, it was 15,000 in one state, it was 30,000 in another, 45 in another, Wisconsin, in several states. I'm not going to list it all, but the point is, if Tom is saying, okay, maybe it was only 150,000 votes because
it was 30,000 votes. 44, I think, what the number was.
Your point is that only these states had election fraud in favor of Democrats, and no Republican states had any election fraud. Now, how would that make sense if every single judge that was presented a case that there was fraud in favor of Biden said there was no substantial evidence of that?
Brian, I can't answer your question because it's not based in reality. I don't know how to respond when you make up what judges ruled upon. All I know is that the Trump campaign in several states brought cases that were not ultimately adjudicated on their merits. And not because they were found to be wanting on the merits, it's because they ran out of time. Now, highlighting dozens of judges litigating other cases about how elections were run, which didn't necessarily implicate fraud, as you suggest they do. I mean, these are all left-wing talking points that are unthoughtfully, frankly, I think you owe to our listeners to be
talking points
credible
that
in
there's fraud
disclosing
when there
this,
has been
that
no
this is
fraud
just
proven,
talking points. I am talking about cases and legal decisions, and I encourage listeners to check me out. Figure out, all these cases are on the public record, and they can draw their own conclusions. And you can see this is the Adam Schiff way of talking about elections. Just say things that are helpfully repeated by the media. And just because you read about it repeatedly with so-called fact checkers in the liberal media doesn't make it true, Brian. You have an obligation to ferret out the truth along the lines I'm suggesting. And you know what? You may still think I'm all wet, but in the end, at least you will have done the research in an honest way.
I trust 86 judges over somebody on Fox
You don't
News
know.
that's
Have you
claiming
read
that
the
there's election
decisions,
fraud
Brian?
without proof.
Where are you getting this number 86? Did you read the decisions? Did you read the substance of the cases? You're just making this
I can
up.
provide you the link. You want the link?
Okay, I can provide you the link, and I will ask you over the next week or two to read everything, and then get back to me as to whether I'm all, just making this up as you're suggesting.
I'd like to make a really quick point about the judges. This is very, very quick. Because this is something that I hear people on the left say all the time. They love to throw, whether we're talking about January 6th or the election cases, they would say, oh, even Republican judges or even Trump-appointed judges. I'm here to tell you from firsthand experience, the Republican judges in the federal courts hate Donald Trump more than most of the liberals, and including some of the judges that he himself appointed. These are old establishment rhinos. So the idea that even a Republican judge came out against Donald Trump, I'm here to tell you, the establishment Republican judges hate Donald Trump more than the liberal judges.
I don't really think. I think it is a bad point saying Republican versus Democrat judge, because
you brought it up.
Are appointed because of their past and because they uphold the law and respect the law. And when you have 86 judges saying, hey, there was no election fraud, I'm going to believe that over some talking head on Fox News or some Trump campaign spokesperson that's saying there's election fraud without proving any election fraud.
And maybe it's not that these judges hated. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick. My bad.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I got to go around the horn a little bit because there's a lot of people here wanting to talk for a while. But Josie, let me let you respond to that, and I'm sure you have some other points too. You've had your hand up for a while, so jump in.
I actually wanted to respond to something that Tom had said about the women's vote maybe 30 minutes ago. So if somebody else wants to respond, they're happy to jump ahead of me, and I can change the subject later.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to go to Scott here in a minute. So Joa, jump in.
Hi, guys. I'm a human behavioral specialist, especially in the area of tribalism. And even during my TED Talks and in a couple publications predicted Trump's win 8 months prior to the win actually happening. And in this election, thankfully, he's not getting elected. It has to do with a lot of things. The way tribalism happens is you start with a group of people, promise them the world like he did to the coal miners, and then also to the vets. Except those promises failed, right? 21 coal mines closed during Trump's presidency. Coal production slowed during Trump's presidency, and his base questions him. The other two reasons that he will not get elected, the fact that he's broken up his tribe, not fulfilled his basic problem when he promised when he first started his candidacy, appealing to the coal miners and to the vets that came back. Although he did expand the vet bill, lines actually got longer, but to some people it might have helped. So I'm not saying that went wrong. But there's two big points that in all the data that I have, and we measure 67 different emotional factors when it comes to brands and also to certain talents, which we have Donald Trump under there. People do not trust him to not be emotionally reactive. During a nuclear war, that's not the person you want. is someone who explodes emotionally. The only way that I see him possibly being elected is if he gets Putin to say he's going to pull out of Ukraine, maybe then, because the number one issue is going to be this war, and only way to get that done is if he can appeal to it. But he has a tall hill to climb because most people do not trust him to not be emotionally reactive. And he lost his promise that he initially made to the coal miners, which was his initial super fan, let's call it, in the very beginning of his campaign.
Yeah, can I toss out a point?
Yeah, you got
along those
30
lines?
seconds, man. You got 30 seconds. Yep.
Okay. Well, a lot of the people sort of on the more, I guess, online right to generalize who do favor Trump often had a running critique of personnel who are in Trump's orbit. Like Trump was poorly served by the people who worked for him. That was pretty much a common refrain, often tended to, I think, absolve Trump personally of a bit more responsibility than he actually deserved. But just throwing this out there for people who would consider themselves, fairly committed supporters of Trump in the next election, who's to say that that very same dynamic wouldn't be replicated? I mean, how can anyone have any confidence that like Jared Kushner is going to be disentangled from Trump? I mean, the guy is family, right? So Jared Kushner was always kind of scapegoated as one of these sort of, nefarious interlopers who was guiding Trump down the wrong path. But like, are we just to think that he's going to be banished from Trump's sphere of influence? This seems unlikely. How about some of these other, quote, neocons? I mean, even if it's a bruising primary campaign, do you think he's just going to totally ostracize like a guy like Mike Pompeo? I don't know. It seems a bit implausible given what we've seen and the pattern that seems to be recurrent with Trump. And then one last thing, because I want to do a bit more of a negative spin on Trump, because a lot of it, the interpretation's been positive, at least just as a thought experiment. If Trump's best chance is to like present himself as a potential peacemaker in Ukraine, and like he's the guy who can mediate between Zelensky and Putin or whatever, and like get Putin to come to take the nukes off red alert. Well, let's look at Trump's foreign policy record. Failed coup attempt in Venezuela, extra legally assassinated a major general in Iran, in Iraq by invoking the legal authorities conferred by the 2002 authorization to invade Iraq. That's what they cited to assassinate Soleimani. Didn't actually carry out the Afghanistan withdrawal to fruition, even though he presented as attempting to do that. Like it or not, Biden's the one who actually presided over the culmination of that policy and actually ended the war. And lots of other examples where you can like say that Trump has this America First policy, or he's relatively more non-interventionist or more peace-minded, but it doesn't tend to accord all that much with the actual record. Not that he didn't start another full-fledged new war. That's true, but he bombed Mosul to smithereens, and tons of civilian casualties. No, not Mosul. Sorry, Syria and the ISIS war, which they're like all the constraints came off, and like there was no regard at all for civilian casualties. Lots of drone strikes, mother of all bombs dropped in Afghanistan. Lots of pretty kind of aggressive foreign policy action. Started sending lethal weaponry to Ukraine, and whereas Obama had refused to do so, elevated Ukraine into this enhanced partnership status that eventually formed one of the grievances of Putin for launching the invasion, which was the increasing interoperability between the United States and Ukraine militarily. So, I mean, Trump's record is not like it's sort of unblemished or at least straightforwardly conducive to this role that people see him playing that could be politically beneficial of like being a mediator to bring about a resolution to the Ukraine war or what have you.
And Michael, there's even one more point, which is we had a war in America that people really cared about because it was a disease that was killing people, which he told to Bob Woodward, this is deadly stuff. And then came on TV a week later and said, oh, it'll pass like the flu, which caused an extra 150,000 deaths by estimates.
Well, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. So I got to bring in Scott here. Scott, man, you have been one of the biggest warriors on the front lines of changing the structure of elections and restoring integrity in the U.S. election system. On Monday, I believe you actually launched an organization to build an early and mail-in voting infrastructure in several states like Arizona. And so I want you to tell us a little bit about that, and then also give us your feedback on what you've heard tonight.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I think President Trump can win in 2024. However, if Republicans wait to vote on Election Day, we will not win the presidential election. We learned in 2022 what we saw in Arizona, that, the majority of Republicans, they waited for that one day. And it was in Maricopa County that we saw 30% of tabulation machines had errors. And we don't know how many people were disenfranchised from that. And so in an effort to expand voting rights access and to lock in as many votes as we can, I created Early Vote Action. So we are going to engage in election day voting, mail-in voting, absentee voting, and where it is legal, ballot harvesting. And this is going to be in Arizona, North Carolina, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And the reason why is because if we win all of those states, in addition to the Republican states that usually vote for a Republican president, we're going to get the 270 electoral votes that we need. And that's even assuming, and I'm not saying Georgia's not going to vote Republican, but that's assuming that Georgia and Michigan go blue, we'll still win the election. And the last thing that I want to say is, if it weren't for ballot harvesting in California and New York, in addition to the work that Governor DeSantis has done in Florida, Republicans would not currently have the narrow majority we have in the House. And the very last thing I would like to point out is the goal is we are not going to be able to provide for election integrity in states that we don't control the legislature. So I'm saying that we must encourage an all of the above approach to voting, so that when we assume power, we will then be able to enact election integrity. And the last is, in the state of Wyoming, for example, we control the governorship, we control the state house and the state senate. But I called and confirmed with an elections office that there are no laws or statutes that prohibit ballot harvesting in the state of Wyoming. So if Republicans are smart, they're going to spend the next 2 years during session enacting election integrity legislation in states that we control, while also going to earlyvoteaction.com and working with me to make sure that we are doing an all of the above approach to voting. And Nick and Mario, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we are having a lot of problems here when it comes to glitching. Our speakers keep dropping. There have been a lot of audience members that have been texting me saying, or messaging me saying that they're dropping. So we probably need to wrap up this space here very shortly. I'm going to give everybody final thoughts here before we do that. We'll start with Harry, and then we'll go around the horn. Harry, jump in.
Yeah, well, thank you again to Nick and Mario for allowing me to be here. Very cool, very cool. Yeah, so just again, to reiterate, I think that there's probably a decent chance that Donald Trump is the nominee for the Republicans in 2024. I don't think there's much disputing that. But will he win? Probably not. I think, the American people are just sick and tired of his conspiracies, his rants and things like that. And I think, a speaker earlier in here, I think it might actually have been a Republican, said that Trump is his own worst enemy. Maybe that was not a Republican. I can't remember. But I also just think that the electoral map is not in Donald Trump's favor. I mean, the states he needs to win, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, all have had very favorable elections for Democrats in recent history. So putting aside all of the conspiracy stuff that he spouts, I think just electorally, it's just not looking good for him. But we'll see. It's still 2023. It's still very early in 2023, and so many things can change. And I'm really looking forward to engaging in more of these conversations as we get closer to the election. So thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate you coming, man. Appreciate you coming. Josie, thank you so much for coming as well, and really looking forward to hearing your final thoughts.
Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to jump back about the women's vote and how that means abortion. And I just wanted to add a quick, I just wanted to inform people about something that most people don't know about Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade hasn't existed in 30 years. So it is legitimately just a talking point. Roe v. Wade, it was the 1973 decision of 7-2, and it declared that there was going to be a trimester standard for states to be able to rule on when it came to abortion. They couldn't. So the first trimester, they couldn't ban or regulate abortion. Second trimester, they could do some regulation. And third trimester, they could do all out bans, right? This was the trimester standard. Well, then Planned Parenthood v. Casey came up in the 90s, and this abolished the trimester standard and replaced it with a standard of burden, all right, which included like the Hyde Amendment, which we've heard about with Joe Biden. So what that did, it essentially made banning and regulation okay for the entire length of the pregnancy. When does the pregnancy start? Conception, or, you know, if you want to get graphic, it starts earlier than that. But it hasn't existed. States have been able to ban abortion to conception since 1992, I think, or 3 or 4. Can't remember when Casey came out. It was one of those 3 years. They've been able to do that, but nobody was bold enough to do that until recently, when it got to be such a volatile topic, and we became so radicalized. So a way to, you know, approach women on this is, you know, to ask them, did you know that Roe v. Wade hasn't existed in 30 years? So they're kind of all being played when it comes to that. So anyway, thank you for having me. But that was just something I realized a lot of people don't know about, and I thought, you know, this is a good opportunity to tell people with such a large space to spread the word on that. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you again, Josie. I hope to have you back here soon.
Yes, please.
Brandon, before I go, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll just be very brief. My closing thoughts are simply that I did put a question out asking if, because Seb Gorka was saying, you know, he's not really seeing that very much, and I just asked if anybody agrees with what I was saying. I've gotten mostly some yes reactions. I've gotten a few people engaging in pretty much the behavior I was describing. A couple of people saying I'm being very negative. They don't understand why I'm talking this way. So I just want to wrap up by saying I'm not being negative. I'm in no way trying to be negative. What I'm trying to be is strategic. I want to win. I'm tired of losing elections. That's what it's about for me. So I think it's great, because I think we have people who are like all in for the way that things are, and I think that those people can be get out and be amazing cheerleaders for the people who already know the way that they want to vote. I want to put my focus on all of the people who are expressing concerns, or who haven't made up their mind, or who need to have their minds changed and come over to our side. So to me, those are going to be the people who don't have the Trump signs in their yard, the people who are not going to the Trump rallies, the people who are not wearing MAGA hats. That's where I'm focusing my concern. So I'm not being negative, I'm being strategic. I want to win. We're all on the same side, except for, what's his face, Harry. We're not on the same side with Harry. But, and by the way, Harry, DM me back, because I'm being sincere in my offer. You guys, thank you so much for having me in the space tonight. It's been great.
Absolutely,
thank you.
Brandon. Yeah. Thank you for coming. All right, so I want to give a couple of shout outs here. Scott Pressler, hashtag the persistence. He's in the audience because he glitched down like everybody else that was up here. So Jack Posobiec, obviously, and Laura Loomer, and everybody, all of our special guests that came here. We're really appreciative of that. And this debate's going to be ongoing here. Obviously, we were experiencing a lot of issues here, but, you know, hopefully this will be fixed soon enough. I'm going to toss it to Mario before this, ends up closing out.
Cool, man. Yeah, not much to add. Sorry for the glitches. It was a nightmare behind the scenes. People kept dropping in and out. A lot of audience members kept getting kicked at scale, and especially in the last half an hour. But and that happened across the board on Twitter. So a lot of spaces glitched today. Some did, some didn't. But appreciate you all. We'll probably see you tomorrow. Not sure what the panel will be about. And yeah, Nick, Jim, and Sam. Great.
Well, I do want to say real quick, you know, before you leave, if you haven't done it yet, sign up for the newsletter in the pinned post. You got to do that, because, you know, if these spaces are going to crash every fucking 15 minutes, you know, you need to hear the important points in the newsletter. So definitely do that. And we will see you here tomorrow regardless. So we appreciate you all coming.